just let me know. Okay, it is 6 o'clock on February 5th. I call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. We'll start with roll call.
Jeannie Nyer.
Michael Hall.
Jerry Fleming.
Dave Bench, and that's what we have, and hopefully some others will show. That gives us a quorum, so we'll move along to public comments. Did anyone sign up for public comments, Michaela?
No public comments.
All right, okay, moving along. We'll head to the consent agenda, and having to do with the minutes. Trust you've all had a chance to read them, and does anybody have a motion on that?
I'll just move to accept the minutes.
Okay. I have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, the minutes carry. Good. Thank you. Moving along, we have public hearing that I will open on a subject. Should I read about what the subject is or do the public hearing? I'll read about what it is. Okay, we're going to have a public hearing, the discussion and possible action on amending Chapter 107, Sections 107-76, minimum required depth and widths of yards related to residential side yard projections. And with that, I'm going to open up the public hearing at, I believe, 6:01. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak about this?
I don't have any seconds.
There is a hand up.
Is there a hand? Okay. There's a person called is that a Parma? Aparna?
Yes.
Yes. Would you like to say something, Aparna?
Well, I'd like to know what this minimum required depth and width of yards is going to change to.
Hi, Aparna. If you could state your full name and your address, just for the record.
My full name is Aparna Katragada, and I live at 408 Wallace Drive.
Thank you.
Do you want to handle that, or should I?
Either way.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, Aparna, this will basically keep the code the same. The difference that it's changing is the difference between what we are calling a overhang is now changing to extend. And this is still keeping your setbacks to a total of 25 feet, 10 foot on the side being the minimum. And so you could do 10, 15, 12 and a half, 12 and a half, or anything to make larger setbacks if you'd like. But this is regarding anything that is projecting into those yards. And with that, nothing can overhang or extend nothing can extend other than an eave or a roof extension closer than 10 feet from a property line. So to put that in, an example would be if you had a 12 and a half foot setback, your projection could not be more than 10 feet from the property line. Does that clarify for you, or do you need
I mean,
a little
I
more?
think that kind of clarifies,
Okay.
but it was very disturbing to get this piece of mail when it says the city of Rollingwood is holding a hearing that will determine whether you may lose the right to continue using your property for its current use. So basically it sounded like to me, like we couldn't be in our home anymore and you guys were going to scrap it.
Yeah.
I completely understand.
So that was very disheartening
I was.
to get.
Yeah, hi, Aparna. This is Amanda. I'm the planning consultant for the city of Rollingwood.
Yep.
That was a new requirement that was placed by the state legislature. Just anytime you might be changing any regulations in a zoning district, the city is required to place that exact wording in a particular font and size on any notice sent out to anybody.
Got it. So that was what was causing me
Yeah.
angst.
That
Okay.
happens everywhere now.
Thank you, Amanda. I didn't know that. In fact, whenever the letter came out, it was on a Friday, a week past, and I started getting emails and phone calls about it saying, what are you doing here? Is this really the way that these things are? And since staff had already gone home, I ended up calling the mayor and said, is this all on the up and up? And he says, yeah, what's wrong with it? And I said, well, the wording's just different, and we're not used to seeing people talk about, the property values changing possibly. And he said, no, that's the way it is now, and that's what we're required to do. So I let the people know who had contacted me that, and Aparna, you are now one of them. So,
Well, thanks for bringing my angst level down.
this is a fairly harmless change.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone else have anything? I guess not. And with that, then it's 6:07, and I will close the public hearing and open this item up for commission discussion. If you've all seen this text before. It had gotten rearranged here from the last council meeting, but just a little bit. Some piece moved from the back of the changes to the front of the changes, but the wording is effectively the same. And if anyone feels the desire to do so, I'd appreciate a motion. About passing this.
Well, I move to accept the ordinance, draft ordinance as as shown in that agenda document.
Okay. Do we need to spell this out, Michaela? Like chapter 107 section in our motion?
I don't see any harm in doing that. I think
Would you do that, Jerry, just for?
Okay.
Okay.
I move we accept chapter 107, section 107-76, minimum required depth and width of yards as shown in the agenda packet.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I had a couple of questions that
All right.
maybe just refresher. So just to make sure I'm clear, I get the eave roof extension, and then we eliminated chimneys but left projections in here. So I guess this would be an eave or roof extension can extend further than any other. So this is basically saying that a projection not including habitable space, so that could be a chimney as well, which is why the chimney is eliminated. So projection can't contain habitable space except for a bay window. So basically the distinction here is that a bay window can only extend 2 feet, but not closer than 10 feet from the.
That would be correct.
So if you're building up to the 10-foot line, you cannot have a bay window.
Nothing can extend into the 10
So
foot.
you could build to 12 feet and have a 2-foot
Exactly.
bay window.
You could do that.
Okay.
And the chimney actually only applies to that 10-foot rule. That's why it's written in there specifically.
And the chimney was eliminated. It used to be that you could extend that to 8 feet, I guess, in theory. Now
That's
you
right.
can't. It can
Yeah.
only be at 10 feet.
We've changed that.
And then the only other thing, I'm sure our council's looked at this. I just looked at the F, it says projections shall not include contain habitable space. I mean, projections isn't really defined. As I was reading this again, it seemed like it would make more sense to say any building feature that, because we call them building features above, any building feature that projects into a side yard pursuant to section 107.76. I mean, I'm fine with it as is if council
Yeah.
and staff and everybody is, but it seemed like that.
I think those words were in that the last time we looked.
Okay.
at
They were,
this.
definitely,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I think we had our shot at it. Any additional discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, ayes carry 5-0. Moving along into our regular agenda, discussion and possible action on structures in required yards. And I was hoping that Mr. Nash would be here to talk a little bit about, do we know if, did Brian say that he would not come, or he just didn't say one way or other?
Correct. He did not confirm or, respond.
Okay, all right, okay, we had Jerry and Brian and Mike Hall. Mike, can you speak to this? Document that I'd asked Mr. Nash to send to us and get on the agenda here, and
I
then,
think it might be a little early, Dave. Yes, item 4, I believe that's different discussion, for item 5. Brian did submit a report.
okay, yeah, this is discussion and possible action on structure, this is the CRCRC.
Correct.
Okay,
That's your,
yeah,
this-
right, yeah, thank you.
which is,
Yeah.
I think it's sort of related, but,
It is, it's, yeah, it kind of comes together.
and
So, yes,
I would first like to point out that what we're talking about in here, AC units, generator, pool equipment, it's not a structure, it's an equipment. And so, I think non-technically, I came up with the distinction, is that if you can hear a structure, I would advise you to move away quickly.
what,
Making noise, I
Yeah,
forgot
the-
that one.
the-
I'm not a comedian, but
Yeah.
you're getting there. So, equipment has motors, makes noise, runs. Some codes don't make a distinction, some do. Lakeway, I looked at, does, it gets very specific into it. And they are specific items versus accessory buildings and structures. So, that would be the first thing I would like people to think about, is we're dealing with these primarily 3 pieces of equipment, but it could be other things that are sort of hybrids. So having said that, I would next like to point out that anything we talk about AC units, all the existing ones are grandfathered. We're not requiring them to move or do anything with them. This is going to be for new construction where they're an integral part of the building. You know where they're going to go, or should know, when you're doing the building plans. So on AC units, I simply said was that they should be allowed in the required side yards, but 10 feet minimum from the property line, and not being allowed in the front yard, and deleting the word required. That,
So, excuse me, in what is on the packet, it doesn't have a minimum of 10 feet written in there.
I know, that's why I
in
was,
the next item, yeah.
Yeah, Jerry, you're talking about the next item, agenda 5, which does relate a lot to item 4. Chair, if you want to bring up
yes, I do.
both items, and then we can kind of discuss
Well,
them
we could do
together in
that.
a roundabout, or?
I think what I want to do is at least revisit the background around this particular thing, the way that it's written, is that this came up with discussion from city staff about what kinds of things could we do a better job of defining for the building code. And this particular thing about HVAC units, generators, and pool equipment became kind of a thing because they show up on plans and they are not necessarily, it's not well understood as to whether or not it's okay for you to put these things where people are saying they want to put them, say, for instance, within the 10 feet between the building and the property line. So we took that on as a thing that we'll look at those, and for the purpose of that discussion, we called each of those things structures. We just did. And And then we considered them individually as to what should or shouldn't. And there was a lot of, give and take on this and opinions and so on. But ultimately, what you see here in front of you is what we thought was the right answer. That's where we were. That doesn't mean that that's the recommendation, and we can do here in P&Z anything you all want to do with it. Now, we could bring up the next thing, but I almost think it might complicate things at this point because I don't really want to talk about outbuildings yet.
It is your meeting, sir.
Okay? So now, Jerry was onto a thing, and he's read, and I guess you're saying that there are certain aspects of this particular thing that you don't care for.
Well, what, you wanna talk about structures or equipment?
We're talking about, we could, I don't know what to collectively call these things. They are not attached to a building.
Are you talking about AC
I mean,
units?
they're not a part of a building, I should say. They're not an outbuilding, type
Are we
structure.
talking playscapes, playhouses?
I can clarify clarify a little bit.
Yeah.
We're
where
just
the
talking
chair-
about that one page from CRCRC.
That's right, that's
now.
right, that's
Correct.
it.
Well,
That's what we're talking
and-
about.
I was too.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
And
So
so
no
where this,
outbuildings on this one, yeah.
yeah, so where this actually derived from is in a review process, there are typical equipment items that are related to a house, and the most general ones that we do come up with are the HVAC, the generator, and pool equipment. With the definitions that we have currently in our code, with structure and building, with a structure, it is identified that it is not allowed in a setback. And so, again, the way the definition reads, a lot of these items have to go on a concrete pad. So a concrete pad, by definition, is structure.
Well,
So the way it's being interpreted by our zoning reviewers is that these items are also a structure, which could also be like an accessory structure of building as before. So when I had talked with the chair, that was kind of the concern of, we keep going back and forth and, with builders and designers and stuff on how these things are interpreted through our code. And so that's where that discussion kind of came up with the CRCRC, and it has now moved on to y'all. So that's where it kind of differs a little bit from like our next item with the bigger things. And I think definitely the way you were saying is these are our equipment. I love that. So
well, may I suggest we put a definition in our ordinance that defines equipment?
that would definitely be a possibility.
That does help a lot.
I think that's a great idea.
I think it's
I
a great
think that-
idea too, because the thing you run into is, how it's interpreted is one thing, but I think most people would say, I wouldn't consider this a structure, so then somebody could design a whole house, they've got their equipment there, and they come in and you say, oops, that's a structure, you need to
You
move
can't
it,
put it
that's
there.
probably not all that easy to do once you've drawn the whole house.
Absolutely.
Well,
And
I think that would call for a motion, just in that one thing, right there, just to say that why don't we motion to have a definition for equipment that includes at least these three things, and we could probably add to it, but, and just say that that's, and then from here on in, our discussion will be that of equipment on this particular
Where can
item.
equipment go?
On this
Yeah.
particular item. Okay, is that fair?
that sounds great.
Do I have, okay, I'll tell you what. I'll save some time and I'll make the motion. I make a motion that we create within the code a definition about equipment. And that definition would include the three things we're speaking about tonight: HVAC units, pool equipment, and generators.
You want the definition now?
Okay? And that's the end of my motion.
I second it.
Did you hear him? He seconded it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I know.
You were looking at her. Okay, very good. All right,
Pardon my-
we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any discussion around that? All right, hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Ayes carry, good. All right, next step, all right? Let's go a little further now. From here on in, all the discussion around this, the particular item is gonna be around equipment. Now, each of these pieces of equipment looks like it's being treated differently. Some in the side setback, some not, so on. Do we want to regulate things for all equipment to be treated the same way? Or do we want to break it out piece by piece?
I think there's kind of a distinction we should think about is that everyone has an HVAC currently and it is somewhere. Not everyone who may in the future want a generator or pool equipment if they add a pool to existing has that already. So that's kind of a important distinction to me. So I think Jerry's point is well taken that if you're building a new house, you're designing a new house, you're going to, you're including all three of these things, you're going to place those at the time you're designing. It's probably, I'm sure there's been some new houses built that maybe later after the fact add a generator, maybe even a pool. And so to the extent you limit where you put an HVAC but grandfather existing, that's probably fine for those existing. But there could be a scenario where somebody wants to add a pool or a generator where, you know, the placement of those things is somewhat dictated by existing structures, trees, how far you can run a plumbing line or a gas line, all of those things. So I know this applies to me. I added a pool after I bought my house. I added a generator later after I bought my house. I don't know exactly how much flexibility I would have had. I wanted them to be in an inconspicuous place over by my HVAC unit. So I guess my point is that will, you know, limiting generator and pool equipment will have more impact to existing homes than, you know, changing rules about HVAC equipment going forward.
Okay.
Okay, so, I guess my question was, do we try to group these together and say all equipment either this way or that way, or do we want to break them up?
I guess my point, I kind of think there might be some distinction.
There should be some distinction.
I agree.
All right, then, with that in mind, can we just then take each of these one at a time and talk about it? And decide whether or not that makes sense or we want to do something differently. Is that all right?
Okay.
We good?
That's good.
All right, we'll start with HVAC then. And the CRCRC recommendation around HVAC was allowed in required side yards with vegetative or structured screening from public view, not allowed in the front required yard, but allowed in the required backyard. All right?
I think that looks great, but I heard Jerry say that, that there was an additional requirement that the side yard HVAC should be at least 10 feet from the property line. Is that correct?
Correct.
I appreciate the work that's been done on this, and I know in prior meetings I was pretty vocal about saying that I was opposed to some of the side yard placements for HVAC systems. And I realized later, I'm not, and I wanted to clarify to the commission, I'm not opposed to side yard HVACs. What I was opposed to was having it too close to the property line. I think it should be at least 10 feet, so I'm totally in favor of that.
Okay, okay.
Well,
I've kind of been consistent on these. I'm fine with them being inside the 10-foot setback. I prefer that than having them in backyards, not just for the homeowner in question, but in recognition of the neighbors. I think when you move something that, if you're sensitive about the sound and you move it from the side, whereas the one other party that it's going to impact is the next door neighbor, 95% of the time there's a fence in between them that provides a pretty good buffer for sound. Most of the time, your house may be excluded from this. Most of the time, people aren't using, don't have patios or whatnot in the side setback where they're sitting quietly and don't want to hear the
But
noise.
if you have a master, a primary bedroom right there, I mean, it can be annoying.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can question the different ones, and I don't know if
But
we've
we're
done
also
it,
not
but
talking about changing existing. We're talking about new construction.
I know. So my position is if existing,
Leave it.
mine's, well, if you're saying it's too loud, the new AC unit going in at the new house is likely to be quieter than the old AC unit at the old house, and it's.
I have a
I-
brand
I've
new,
never-
I have a
I've-
brand new
yeah.
unit in my house, and it's still very loud at my house.
Yeah,
Well-
I don't know.
So they're
I've
not
never had
that
an issue with the
quiet.
sound from an HVAC unit.
Well, I can get technical here. And they are getting louder because they're using 2 blades instead of 3 and 4 because it's cheaper. And those little blades go faster and it gets louder, so. But
I'm not
The
trying to,
energy-
I'm
the
not
ener-
saying change what you have or what's existing. There are a lot of people that have smaller yards and the HVAC system is inside. I'm just saying for new construction,
Yeah.
when we have big yards, I don't understand why, why we can't just carve out a little piece in that structure where that HVAC system could go and still be 10 feet from the property line.
Yeah, it just impacts. I mean, sometimes that's easier said than done. But if you got a room there bumping a.
We have big yards. Do it with the new construction. Let them do it.
That's.
Well,
I'm not.
Well, you think about
I
what we.
disagree. Yeah.
Yeah, what we had just passed here, to some extent, it's not too different from the chimney argument. That the chimney is not allowed to go within the 10-foot setback. Just not allowed. And you could say something similar here with this equipment that, what we have here is okay, provided that it does not fall within 10 feet of the
Right.
property line.
That's all I'm saying.
And
I understand. Yeah, I
yeah,
completely
and-
understand.
and
I
it's the
just
same
disagree.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that one thing, the chimney is actually a part of the house, but the HVAC or generator is not. My only concern in that is that, I think that we can make that restriction on new builds just fine. And say, okay, new builds, you got to, if you're going to put it on the side, then you got to give yourself another 2 feet or 3 feet in order to accommodate this equipment. For existing structures, though, okay, a lot of them are going to have air conditioners, and a lot of them do fall within the 10-foot right now. And I don't think anybody would have any trouble with people replacing their units the same spot that they are. But if someone came along and said, okay, but I want to put a generator in there too, right next to the HVAC unit, are we, by saying 10 feet, are we disallowing someone from doing something that is already happening in their yard, their side yard? Are we disallowing them from doing more? Or are we just plain going to say, no generators are allowed in that 10-foot regardless, because I have a vintage old house, but, so.
Well, I thought, according to this, the generators are supposed to be in the backyard.
Well,
Yeah, that's practically,
okay.
effectively, yes. Based on this recommendation, it's currently not that way.
Okay.
I heard they were louder.
I'm sorry?
And generators are sometimes louder than the AC units.
When they run, they're definitely louder. They run once a week,
Yeah, I know.
unless they're running because the power's out.
Okay.
You're okay with it?
Yeah, but my point, which I've said before, if it's in the side setback, it potentially impacts one neighbor most directly. You put it in the backyard, like my backyard, they're all, obviously all the lots are different. My backyard, if you move my generator to the backyard when it's running, there will be now 2 other neighbors who will be able to hear it better than they can right now. And it's kind of the same thing with the pool equipment. I've brought it before. My neighbor behind me has a pool, and the pool equipment sits right next to the pool, which is just across my fence. And I can hear their pool equipment. My pool equipment is buried on the side. I'm sure my neighbor probably at some level can hear it, but I'm pretty sure my 2 rear neighbors can't hear it. If I move that pool equipment into the backyard, those 2 neighbors can probably hear it. So these things make noise. They're going to go somewhere. You got to put it somewhere. To me, it's, you know, I'd rather limit the number of people that are as directly impacted. You know, I haven't talked to my neighbor about the equipment I have back there, but I've not had any complaints, I know.
All right, well, why don't we entertain a motion around HVAC right now? It seems like we have fairly good agreement with some change. Someone wants to voice a motion, that would be dandy.
Well, we're gonna,
Go ahead.
well, I have to read what we just changed. HVAC units shall be allowed in required side yards, provided they're located a minimum 10 feet from the property line with vegetative or structural screening from public view. Right?
Do they need screening if they're, I mean, we're
They
talking
can-
about cutting into the house. I mean, is that
Well,
screening?
They could be front street viewable. That's where that came from, public view,
Public view. Okay.
yeah.
So a fence is fine. If
Yeah,
they're behind
so-
the fence, yeah.
Yeah, or structural screening.
Yeah, so if they're, so the only way that would apply if you don't build a fence in the front and you could see it, you'd have to do something else.
Exactly. Okay, a little bit of screening. And, not required in front, required yard, okay? And allowed in required backyard. I forgot
That's
to
your
say,
motion.
move to accept the,
You have it, okay?
all right.
We have a motion, we have a second?
Hey Jerry, do you mind, since you guys kind of had that conversation, do you mind repeating that motion just so I can get like a clear, full motion? I would appreciate that.
I'm sorry, I missed some of that. I move that we accept the HVAC as shown on here with the condition we have a minimum 10 foot from property line.
That'll work.
And I second the motion.
All right, we have we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
I also don't think the 10-foot is something that should be set in stone, even for new builds. I somehow feel that some of this things we're doing is really arbitrary, and we're just picking something up and saying it should be this, but not really assessing what impact that might have. If a lot of houses that existing have a design that has it closer than that, then obviously this is going to affect a lot of new construction, some of which isn't on just flat rectangular lots, that it might have a much bigger impact. So I disagree with 10 feet. If somebody wanted to say 5 feet, maybe I think that's more feasible. But like some places have a 5-foot side yard is all you have. And even in that, they'll allow an AC. So I don't think this 10-foot, especially if you're gonna add screening, is necessarily needed to address the concern. I think even an AC that's, 5 foot away and has some screening is probably not going to be very loud. But that's my kind of take on it. Seems like an over-regulation to me to say 10 feet on top of everything else.
So Jerry made a motion. Did anybody second that?
And it's been seconded, yeah,
Perfect.
been seconded, yeah.
Okay. I can respond.
Oh, you can, go ahead, Tom.
Well, it's not arbitrary. This is, the city of Lakeway has in their ordinance, it must be located 10 feet from the property line. City of Westlake Hills allows you to get 5 foot closer to the property line, but their property lines vary from anywhere from 30 feet to 15 feet, so the net result is a minimum of 10 feet in the worst case to the property line. So our two peer cities have the same restriction.
Well, Westlake Hills has really large lots, yeah, bigger setbacks as a result.
Right, but I was thinking, this is the one that it's, and if it's two-story building, it's only 15, they go to 15 feet. So for their smallest lot, less than 0.375 acres. So it's not new or novel, or it's conventional.
Well, if an adjacent property has the 12-foot setback on the side yard, and then the new construction has 12 and a half feet also, 12 and a half and 12 and a half, right? Or 10 and 15, right?
They can have whatever they want.
As long as there's 25 feet total.
25 feet total. So it's possible that you could have a home, a neighbor that is 10 feet from the property line? Okay, 10 feet. So if you don't do the 10 feet and say the new construction, that if you're not limiting it, then it could be effectively within 15 feet of the existing structure of the neighbor. And you think about 15 feet, so how long is one of these tables? How long is one of those?
Probably about 8 feet.
Yeah, fit on the truck.
Looks like 8 feet.
So,
Twice this then. Close enough. When you say 15 feet, 2 of these. Pretty close.
well, that does seem pretty big, actually. Are you sure that that's?
We have relatively large setbacks, I mean, it's compared to Austin, not compared to Westlake, but.
Yeah, but dimensions inside the building are perceived larger than when you're outside.
Do we
But that
know
AC is much closer to the neighbor's house than the other neighbor who is getting a 10-foot buffer. So like, if it's that loud, is somebody gonna put it right next to their house and have it be really loud? I think that's what I mean. I think it's over-regulation, because I know if I'm putting the AC outside my side yard, I'm not gonna have a loud AC because I don't want it, because it's really close to me. So like, why would it affect somebody who's 25 feet away from me? It won't, because like, just sound doesn't work that way. It's gonna have some buffer, it's gonna probably have fences, it's gonna have natural blocks, and plus, like I said, you're not gonna wanna have a really loud AC right next to your house anyway. So you're putting something in there that, yeah, sure, it might have the effect for someone who, I don't know who would do it, but like sticks their AC way far away from their house because it's loud right at their neighbor. But that's usually not what happens. It's like somebody's designing a house and they say, oh, well, where can we put the AC, or, you know, and they kind of put it wherever it's designed, and that's what they do. And there's remodels too. There's, you know, there's lots of topography constraints that might be smarter for you to do it somewhere that, like, maybe you're 8 feet away or something, right? So I'm saying, by saying 10, you're basically saying somebody is going to have to carve out of their house if they run into a spot where it would be closer. And I just don't think that's worth it. I don't think you're actually accomplishing anything because of the way people will typically build.
Well, first, I don't think it's over-regulation, and we're maintaining a 10-foot setback area, which just gives you all the benefits of the airflow,
For AC,
sun.
I'm saying, yeah,
Well, for
specifically.
anything and everything. We're
Well, I'm not saying
maintaining
for
it.
everything.
talking
We're not
about AC.
discussing generators. We're not discussing the other things.
Well,
Those, I
I'm-
think, it
I'm
makes
just
more
saying
sense.
that the 10
But
foot
for
is
existing
a minimum
AC,
setback
you're creating
distance.
2 classes. You were built before, so this is okay. You weren't, so you can't do this. Which, to me, that's like something we should actually try to avoid. If it's really that bad to be close, then that's an issue. But I think from what we've seen, like, how many complaints do we get about loud AC?
I think that's the core question to me,
So
is do you fundamentally think
there's
ACs
not
are
If
loud?
there's not an issue with loud AC in general, then why so much attention to exactly how far away it is? That's why I say it seems like overregulation. I'm fine with the screening, I'm fine with the other stuff. If you wanted to say 5 feet, I'm cool with that, whatever. 5 feet, we could, you know, easier to work with. 10 feet could, in certain circumstances, be a lot, depending on how a design is. And I just think that, like, in Rollingwood, custom homes are being built. So sometimes they want to do certain things, and maybe, like, that actually affects it more than it would otherwise if you have a lot that has, you know, varied topography, maybe where the electric comes in, that's where they want to put the AC or things like that. So that might be a shorter distance right there. But the next house might be 30 feet away from there too. But by telling this house, hey, you need to move over 10 feet, then even though that neighbor really gets no benefit, wouldn't care, it's still what you have to do. So that's what I'm saying is over-regulation. It's added cost of just because we said 10 feet, then it's 10 feet, so that adds on to someone else's, you know, burden. Which, if it accomplishes something, I have no problem with that. But I'm just concerned that maybe, you know, maybe in your case it does.
I'm not talking about my case.
Well, you
My
know, but
case
like
is
in
fine.
one
I'm
case,
not-
if you have too short,
I'm just talking about.
you know,
I mean, it's
and
not just, it's, you know, primary bedrooms, it's nurseries, you know, baby rooms, it's, you know, it could be a problem. My house is fine. I'm not talking about my house. To me, one of the issues is, I guess, what kind of neighborhood do we wanna have in the future? Because, you know, Westlake, Rob Roy, you know, there's some beautiful neighborhoods and that are around, and is that what we're aspiring to be? Or are we aspiring to be more of a middle-class neighborhood, which of course I think that ship has sailed, but nevertheless, in more expensive neighborhoods, you do have more space between the houses. And that's one of the reasons why people like those neighborhoods. They're bigger. And they do plan for more separation between the neighbors. So, I mean, I understand your point, and I hear you. I guess for me, it's like, well, what do we want for our city to be? Do we want it to be a
Well, I don't think-
luxurious, you know, community, a luxury housing community, or do we want a middle-class community where things are closer together and louder? I don't know.
but this doesn't make it louder. Like, nothing in here says your equipment's gonna be louder. It's just, you're talking about how far they have to put it away from a property line. And that's what may or may not have an effect on a neighbor, but
I think,
it has a big effect on someone building a house if they're trying to do a certain way and they're trying to put it somewhere that maybe it's slightly closer.
Okay. Michael, I think because we have a motion and a second on, I think that if you want to change the motion, I think that you can ask if you can do a friendly amendment to this and see whether that gets accepted. And if so, then we can vote on it that way.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't get accepted, then we're gonna be ending up voting on this the way that it has been motioned.
Sure.
So if you would like to make a friendly amendment to this, just to,
Can I just say one very quick thing?
Yeah.
I think the two key points to me are, do you think AC units are in situations problematically loud for the neighbor? I think that's a question, yes or no. Personally, for me, the answer is no. I've never heard of anybody who said, God, this AC unit next to me, it's hard for me to sleep or hard for my baby to sleep. I haven't heard that in any community, Rollingwood or otherwise. And then two, if you think yes, the answer to one is I think that can be problematic. Do you think that moving it, I don't know what the average, if you were built to 10 feet, and I don't know if there's rules around how far an AC unit needs to be clear from the building wall for whatever reason or not, but call it, I picture mine's probably a foot away and the thing's probably 2 feet wide. So if your answer is yes, I think that can be loud and problematic for the neighbor. If you move it 3 feet over to the side, does that eliminate that problem? And to me, personally, the answer to the first one is no, and the answer to the second one is no. And so I'm not in favor of restricting new construction to build around that dynamic, because I don't think it's gonna provide any real relief for a neighbor.
you know, I think that the focus seems to be on the air conditioner itself, but really what this is about is preserving a side yard. That's really what it is preserving what the required side yard is. And are we allowing that preservation to be changed or not? That's it.
Yeah, we agree that almost all the existing are in the side yard, and it's not been some huge historic problem.
That's right. But by putting the 10-foot restriction on there, then that ensures that no side yard will be having any equipment encroachment on it. So I think that's really kind of the issue, is 10 feet.
Well, I don't know. A lot of people
Is
have been
10
talking
feet
about
segment.
noise. I'm not sure I agree that that's the real issue.
Okay.
But maybe it is. Maybe
Okay.
it is for some, and maybe it's not for others.
Okay.
Well, that's what I was talking about with, are we building for a luxury community, or are we envisioning more of a tighter community? And so for me, it's not the noise, it's.
Well,
it's the
visibility,
place.
they can still build to 10 feet, you're not, if there's a fence in the front, which there probably is, you're not gonna see the AC unit. So visibly, I don't think it has any impact, to what you're speaking to.
But maintaining that side yard though.
Yeah, so that, to me, that's what it is. Are we talking about, we don't want anything in the side yard no matter what, or are we talking about noise?
No,
I think we've talked
never
more
said
about
that.
noise.
We've never said, we don't want anything in the side yard, we were talking
I
about
think
how
that's
much
what David
space.
said.
How much space to maintain the side yard.
Or in the required side yard, I'm talking about, yeah, the required side yard. I agree, if you build 20 feet back for one reason, you have plenty of space to put your AC in. I mean, that's my personal opinion, and I sense that I'm in the minority, which is fine, but I'm just communicating my personal
Oh, I
opinion.
don't know.
To me, it's really more of a question of what's the maximum distance between between the two houses. So instead of saying a specific requirement of 10 feet, maybe we should be looking at it as a requirement from the other house. So that if there is an existing house built adjacent to new construction, and that house is 10 feet from the property line, then the new construction should be absolutely required to have their AC unit at least 10 feet from their
Yeah.
property line.
But
So
then they're
it's-
getting penalized on their lot because of what somebody did before
Yeah,
them.
but
You know-
but it maintains the space, the distance.
Yeah, I think, I hear it kicked around an awful lot. We have this requirement in the code that says is that we have to have effectively 25 feet of side yard, have to do it, okay? And the minimum that might be is a 10-foot piece and whatever else. But I've heard it kicked around and say, well, really what you want is, what we have is it's 25 feet between houses. But I don't really think that's in the code. I don't think it really says that. That really you could have a 10 and a 10 as far as the code goes today.
Right, that's my concern.
Yeah, so, with that in mind, and with what Jeannie is saying, with regard to wanting to maintain a certain amount of space between houses, 20 feet is effectively our minimum.
Okay.
And if we say that we're putting an air conditioner in there, within that 20 feet, now we've just kind of broken it down to something less, maybe. If both sides do it,
Which is
Well,
probably
really-
a 50-50 chance.
yeah, which is probably a temptation because they say,
Then you
oh,
got
we'll put
dual
all the
air
air conditioners in the
conditioning.
same spot, so,
Yeah, I mean, is it noise or is it setback? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know.
yeah.
Anyway, I've made my position clear, which is all I wanted to do. So.
So, okay, but it stands. We have a motion and we have a second. So if there's no other.
So anyway, I interrupted. I don't know.
Yeah, is there any further discussion? We can take the vote. Or we can change the motion. All right, we have a motion, we have a second, and no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. The vote is 3-2. The ayes carry. So it is. Let's move along to generator. All right. The way it's written is a generator is not allowed in the required yard, not allowed in the required side yard, not allowed in the required front yard, and allowed in the required backyard. Is that satisfactory?
Well, do we want it in the front yard that's not the required yard? Most of it's
I
gotta be
don't
in
know
the-
that, we can get into that, whenever, do you want to, now you're telling people how they're allowed to build their house.
Well,
Okay.
I would, No, I would
You're
say
already doing that.
practically it's
I
gonna
don't
be where the pool is, it should be, and that's in the back.
The pool is
I'm
not,
ignorant.
the pool
Well,
is
how
not
big
allowed?
is a generator? I mean, I don't know what I've never.
Oh, the generator, I thought we were on the pool, but the generator still,
Okay.
should be close to the, power, panel
Okay.
and the weatherhead and all that, and that's,
You know, we have, I guess, jurisdiction here within this group to specify what's allowed in the zones that we've regulated within the code. And those zones are required yards. You know, do we have the authority to say, well, yeah, but if it's in the buildable area, you can only put it in this, the front or the sides or the back? Can we do that?
well, I think that's debatable. I think, lawyer, we can dictate, we can require things out of the front yard.
Yep, you can do that. Yeah,
It's an
that's
ordinance.
permitted per zoning.
Not in the required front yard, but the actual, I mean, from here, you know, I might have my 30 feet of setback and required yard, and another 20 feet behind that is where I start my house, so I'm 50 feet away from the curb. Am I allowed to put a generator? Can I make a rule that says I'm not allowed to put a generator in that 20 feet?
Yeah, I mean, you could make a rule that says a generator can't be in front of the main structure, things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
That's permitted per zoning.
We're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, so, continue, sir.
Well, if we put it in the front yard, it needs to be screened.
Well, if it's in the side yard or
Or
the
the
front
required,
yard?
or anywhere. If it's in-
Anywhere.
Well,
Has to
in
be
the,
screened.
in the front yard, it needs to be, if you wanted to say even,
Okay,
How about if it's just
if you
visible
allow
from
it,
the
it
public
needs to be
right-of-way?
screened.
okay.
Or visible from public right-of-way, don't we have that somewhere
Well,
else?
we have structured screening from public view up above. I mean,
Yeah, for the
think that's
HVAC,
the
can you do
idea.
the same, you know?
the notion's the same.
I mean, for example, there are houses, I think, Brian Ryder's house is way back.
Yeah.
There's just tons of vegetative screening. So if he put a generator in front of his house and doesn't wanna put a screen around it for whatever reason, but nobody can see it from the street anyway, what do we care?
It's effectively screened, because you can't see it from the public view.
Yeah. So that's what I would say.
I was just thinking that if you had somehow power coming in from the front on the side somewhere instead of the side or the rear, that it would, maybe you go to the Board of Adjustment and get a hardship.
Oh, I don't know. Let's try to stay away
I mean, I think screening from public view is fine. Of course, then you get into what is, you know,
Yeah.
what screening, do you like how their screening looks, you
Yeah.
know?
How
how
big
far
are
you-
they? What do they look like?
Generators is similar to pool equipment, you know, with the main pool thing. It's probably similar to
Well,
that.
we just,
So is it bigger than an HVAC?
It's bigger
unit?
than an HVAC unit, yeah.
You might put two HVAC units together and be
Yeah.
probably
Oh,
pretty
so
close.
that's pretty big.
Pretty close, yeah.
And you said they're very loud.
When they're running, they don't run much, but they are, yeah.
Okay. And
They
is
do a
that an
test
electric
run.
one or a gas one?
Gas typically.
Gas.
well, I think Tony had a good point. If you had this stuff later, it would be a hardship if your electrical's coming in on the side, like it does on my house, but I'm way away from the property line. So I think, existing conditions should be separate from new construction.
The hard part is, I mean, you know, I think generators have become more popular recently after the ice storm, which is why I
Right.
got one. You know, you could do that, you know, I guess at that point, there's nothing to stop somebody from building their house and then building their new house and then putting in the generator later to get around it. I mean, I don't know what percentage of our new houses that are being built have a generator incorporated into the plan. I would guess it's probably fairly high. I don't-
Some generators are
gas powered and some are electric.
No, they can't be electric.
Well,
Yes.
It'd be a battery backup.
Yeah.
That would be a
yeah,
battery.
like solar, like a solar.
Well, it's like the Tesla Powerwall that
and
stores
some are
battery
diesel,
power.
Yeah,
some
okay,
are
well that-
propane,
but-
or
okay.
gas.
Yeah, and most of them now, because we have natural gas, the incentive is if I lose power, I lose electrical power. I have gas lines already to my house for my stove and whatnot. You use the natural gas to generate. That's what most of them are, unless you do a Tesla Powerwall or something. Which I don't know if those make noise. Probably not.
The only Tesla Powerwall I know is indoors. It's in the people's garage.
Yeah, I don't know much about them.
Yeah. And that's another kind of equipment, I think.
Yeah.
So I guess getting back around to this.
I think the
what do we wanna
distinction
do
is,
with this?
whether you are worried about noise, an AC unit runs, quite often.
Right.
Generator runs typically, I think it's 10 minutes once a week to test itself, to make sure that it runs, and you get a report from your phone that says, tested, it's working. And then obviously power goes out, then it's gonna run nonstop until the power comes back on. And it will be loud at that point, and louder than an AC unit, and potentially impactful to neighbor. I mean, my view is power's out, it's a little bit kind of a unique condition, all hell's kind of broken loose. I'd like to think, I certainly will invite my neighbor if she doesn't have power and I do, to
Yeah.
come enjoy that. But it's definitely louder when it's running. There's no doubt about that. I personally am, obviously I'm not as sensitive to noise based on what I said before. I'm fine with generators being in the side. I think if they're in the front, I think that's going to be a highly unique situation. I think they should be screened from view of the public right away. Most often they're either going to be in the side or the rear. Again, here a generator, I think, is less impactful to less neighbors in the side yard, more impactful to that neighbor directly next to you, but less impactful to the ones in the rear. I'm fine with them in the side setback.
All right. Well, we have some words written here, and I heard you say a lot of things. And what every reference here in these 3 lines is about the required yards, okay? And there was some discussion about whether or not, if it wasn't the required yard, but it was the front yard, we would maybe want that screened, maybe. If it's in the required side yard, we've already made a motion for the HVAC that there be a 10-foot requirement. Would we want to include that here as well, do the same thing?
Why did the CRCRC recommend that it not be in the side yard, I guess?
I think it really was the noise factor. And we did talk about it, but this is, I want to say that this is fresh, it's not. I think we made these, this recommendation came out, I think, in September. Well, it did, actually, September 10th. So I can't remember everything that we said 4 or 5 months ago, but I can tell you that we talked about it an awful lot, and we did capitulate quite a bit on these very things. Why not the side yard? Why the side yard? And I think it came down to the noise factor.
Okay.
Or it may have been, I think it's like the last one. It could be, for somebody, it could be a factor of noise. It could be the sanctity of the setback. It depends what's more.
Well,
Okay, what I'm coming to is on the generator, the first one is not allowed in required side yard except existing buildings are exempt. And not allowed in required front yard, except in the front yard that's not the required yard, it could be screened. And allowed in the required backyard.
I think it probably needs to be screened. I don't even know if you need to say if it's in the front yard. I think it just needs to be screened from view of public right of way. I think that's enough, because
Regardless.
it could be on the side of somebody's house and they don't have a fence. There's a few of the older houses that have no fence.
It
and
need to
so
be
you would
screened if
want
it
to
was
be
in the
screened.
rear yard?
Well, I wanted to
I think if it's visible, yeah,
Okay,
because
all
like
right.
as an example, there's a house for sale in Hatley that it doesn't front Hatley and it
Sure.
backs up to the ditch, has no backyard, so you
Okay.
just see open in the backyard. Or You can see, yeah, or if
Yeah,
you
you
put,
can see in our backyard.
if you
yeah.
put one in your
That's right.
backyard,
There it is,
You would,
yep.
yeah, you would screen it. I think that's
Yep.
what people want,
We
right?
have no intention to fence that in.
Right.
We love our ugly.
Well, I'm not saying ugly. I'm just saying if you put a generator there, I think the spirit of what Jerry's talking about is you'd want to block it from the view of the from the
Right.
public right of way.
Right.
So I think you don't need to say if it's in the front, you'd screen it. If it's in, I mean, anywhere it's viewable from the public right of way, you need to screen it. But
Okay.
it seems, which is how it's written in the HVAC.
So, what we need to do is just make this into a motion and off to the races.
So I'm, just to clarify, so the discussion is saying, people are saying that it doesn't really matter if it's in the side yard, the front yard, or the backyard, as long as it is screened from public view. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that.
Well,
no,
there's more distinctions than that, I think, yeah.
that-
I think that's just screening. So
That's-
if,
Yes.
That's part of
yeah,
it.
just screening.
Yeah, it's part of it.
So there's the question of where it goes and whether you screen it. I think that's,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
answers,
like-
if you can see it from the right of way, screen it.
Right, that's what I mean.
Right,
Yeah.
right, generator, screened from view,
Screened from
Period.
public view.
and meets the following
And then
conditions.
the more important question is where can it go and not go?
Right, and located in these parts.
Well, I personally don't think that any equipment should be in the front yard.
Well,
Because just to make a nice looking neighborhood.
In the
you know,
required
I
front
mean, it
yard,
could
I
be-
agree, yeah.
Yeah,
In the
I mean-
required front yard. I think the distinction if somebody's house is really far back and. it's-
Right, like
but-
Brian's, but
But,
that's.
but in that case, it's
unusual.
probably not going to be in the required front yard still, right? So I think it should not be in the required front yard.
Okay, so we
I
did
think
that.
any equipment should not be in the required front yard.
In required front yard, that's right. Okay, good. So, we're getting closer, I know. It would appear that nothing in the generator is not allowed in any required front yards here, okay, so far, or required yards, period. Okay?
I'm okay with them in the required side yard. I'm not okay.
You are okay with them in the required side yard, okay.
Or a required, well, I don't like them in the backyard. I prefer them to be in the required side yard versus anywhere else.
well, new construction, I would,
Yeah, I think y'all are probably gonna have the same opinion you would on HVAC. I don't know why. you
Okay.
make
yeah,
the distinction.
that,
I have the same opinion on both too.
For me, it's a visual thing. I want the space.
Well, it-
I want our neighborhood to look
You won't be able to
nice.
see it if there's a fence. They're not tall, but, you know.
well, it goes beyond that. You have this natural area in there
I know, I just
Yeah.
like space
of everything. So, we're-
Okay.
between houses.
Well, who wants to take a stab at a motion?
well, I'll go and then you guys correct me as we go along. Okay, I move that generators, be screened from public view in all cases, in all locations, and they be located, in the following places or conditions. Locations limited to the following: not allowed in required side yard except for existing buildings are exempt. 2, not located in required front yard. And 3, allowed in required backyard. That,
Okay,
period.
period. All right, we have a motion.
So you're not allowing it in a required backyard, so
I'm allowing
Different
it,
than
just what
you
it
are.
says, just what it says
you're
here.
allowing it in the required backyard. Okay.
Okay, okay.
And in the side yard, provided it's 10 feet.
That would be.
No, did you say that? No.
No, he
Oh, I
did
didn't.
not.
Oh,
I-
I'm sorry.
He did
I'm
not?
sorry.
Well, I
We've
said
that
it, I
sometime.
said it's not required in the
Okay.
side yard, so it's
Okay.
10 by
Okay.
15.
Okay, so they're prohibited from being in the side yard with new construction.
Right.
But can it be in a
Okay.
side yard if it's 15 feet?
You're talking about encroachment.
Well, no.
Well, no,
but-
no,
Well,
I'm
you-
saying,
but
we
that-
just
that's a
said
good
on
point.
HVAC, you're
Right.
allowed to have it in the side yard.
Right, you're, that's,
It's a
that's what I-
question, I don't, you know,
Provided that it's at least 10 feet away from the property line. But that would need to be an amendment to the motion.
well,
We need a second, we need a second.
I think he's still working on it. I mean, I don't think he stopped the
Well-
motion, right?
right. No, okay, here, I'll start again. I move the generators, be screened from public view in all locations, and the locations be limited to the following. One, they're not allowed, they are allowed in required side yards, provided they're 10 feet minimum from the property line, and except existing buildings are exempt. Okay, number two, they're not allowed in required front yard. And number three, allowed in required backyard. Period.
Okay. Good.
I'll second that with a concern or whatever that we do need, I think, to define public view a little bit. Because, I mean, you're not talking about the neighbors that live behind you.
When we would talk about this in CRCRC, it would be from the public right-of-way, the street.
The street.
The
Okay, so
street.
the public view is from the street.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's fine. It just needs to be defined a little bit. All right, I'll second the motion.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
I'll point out one thing that, just to make sure you're thinking about it. Picture that this is how we had designed a house that we didn't wind up building. But, so it's easy for me to picture, I'll walk you through. So let's just say somebody builds an L-shaped house, right? You front the street, L-shaped, and just assume that you're to the 10-foot setback on the L. And you're allowed to put your generator in the backyard, required backyard. So let's just say you're L-shaped, they're kind of maximizing that side of it, avoiding the trees on the other side, whatever. So you're now to 10 feet from the side, and your house extends back to 20 feet from the rear, right? It's 20 foot required.
Yeah.
Then you put
Yeah.
your generator, because you can't put it on the side because you're at 10 feet, so you put the generator behind the end of the L in your required backyard.
Kind of here.
That's gonna be 15 feet, the edge of the generator is gonna
Yeah.
be 15 feet from your rear neighbor
That's right.
and 10 feet from your side neighbor and however many feet from your diagonal rear neighbor,
I guess.
producing the noise that we're questioning about. I mean, this is my position, I would rather it be up towards the front of the house, buried on the side setback, only impacting the side neighbor, even though it's within 10 feet. So I'm just saying, you put a if you're worried about noise and you put a generator in the backyard, I think you're creating noise for a lot more people than when it's in the side yard.
Well, it can be in the side yard as long as it's 10 feet from the property line.
Yeah,
That was your
Yeah,
revised,
right.
yeah,
That's right.
so I think that would be covered.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is that you described a 10-foot side yard.
yeah.
Yeah. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All right? All
The
in
other
favor?
thing is there's nothing to prevent somebody from building their house, designing it for a generator to be installed at a future date.
Well, that's
We're
okay.
providing
And then
guidance.
it's an existing house.
We are providing guidance in that right now, as to
Well,
how, whenever
well,
you're
we-
building a house, what you ought to be considering.
We're not.
No, but what I'm saying is we're exempting existing
That's-
houses. So I build my house designed for the generator to put it in the 10-foot
Wow.
side setback. And then a year later, I come in and install it. Now it's being installed on an existing property that's been exempt.
All right.
But it was approved, but with the permitting having been approved, I don't think that's.
No, you go permit it separately later
We
as an
can-
existing house.
You can put a date on it. Typically, you'd put a date on an ordinance like this where it would be like any houses built prior to passage of this ordinance.
Okay, well, that's not what, is it?
If
You just
that-
said existing
yeah.
construction exempt.
So maybe
you
it
might
may
wanna-
be best to clarify, just to have that on the record.
Saying houses built prior to 2025, is that what we're gonna say?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
okay.
Well, it'd probably be for
Okay.
building permits submitted after the date of the ordinance.
That would come about by state law, the effective date of the ordinance. would be
Yeah, I mean, if they submitted a building permit,
before that.
We
before
just
that,
said
they would be
construction,
vested,
yeah.
but yeah, so it would just be any new construction.
Okay, so
You
do
know,
we,
I have, I'm sorry to bring this up, but, we have lots of flat roofs now. I mean, what about people who wanna put it on top of their flat roof?
It's okay,
Is that,
yeah.
Yeah, I've got two across the street, and if actually,
Can you put a generator on the roof? I don't know.
not a generator, but they're two AC units, and they make some noise, and I would have to be out in the street to hear them.
Yeah.
But versus that being, you know, down on the ground, and they'd be closer. So
I was just curious if this is gonna,
I don't know if you can put a generator on a roof. I don't know.
Well, you're gonna be farther away from
well,
your
it's
power
fine,
source.
I mean, I'm not concerned,
But
I was
the
just
point is, yeah,
wondering about the
you-
future. I don't wanna be driving down, any street in Rollingwood really, and see too many structures on the top because it looks too commercial.
Oh,
Unless they're screened appropriately, I mean, if they look like a chimney, you know, somehow,
think-
screened in a way that they're not unattractive.
yeah, in commercial, they're screened rooftop units.
Well, not all
I
of them.
think,
Yep.
I mean, I see
But
them.
it's possible to screen
To
them.
screen it, okay.
I think
well,
in this neighborhood, I think that you're gonna find that people are gonna wanna put a screen around it if they were gonna put it on their roof.
Okay, well, I'm just,
Yeah, I think so. You know, is that right? No, not always?
Drive down Nixon.
Oh,
Yeah,
Okay.
you're up higher than me. You can,
yeah, that's a concern I have.
ah,
But that is again,
yeah.
public view. So
There you have
that,
it.
Yeah.
so
point.
as long as it's within public, screened from the street,
We-
public view. Or
And,
whatever.
and you actually, your motion actually has in all cases that it is screened from public view, didn't you? Didn't you start off with that?
Yeah, yeah, okay,
That's right.
yeah.
There we have it.
okay.
Vote in. All right, now, okay, we have a first, a motion, and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay. The ayes carry 4-1. Okay. Moving along. Pool equipment storage, okay? Where the CRC has specified it, not allowed in the required side yard, not allowed in the front yard, allowed in the required backyard. Okay. Some discussion around this?
Well, I think this, again, we should require that anything be screened from public view. Any of the pool equipment storage should be
Okay.
required to be screened from the public view, with public view defined.
All right, okay. Anybody else have something here?
I'm gonna vote no either way, but I don't know why you wouldn't do it the same way as a
The rest
generator.
of them, yeah, I agree. Same thing, just require it be 10 feet from the property line, on the side yard.
Can you handle that, Michaela, if we, okay, you wanna turn that into a motion?
Sure. I move that the pool equipment storage, building requirements for new construction, or for, construction after the adoption of this ordinance, require that the pool equipment be allowed in a required side yard only if it is 10 feet from the property line. It will not be allowed in the front yard, and it will be allowed in the required backyard.
And you put in screen from public view,
Yes, well, yes, I did,
all right,
at the beginning.
I
all right,
second it.
okay, that's the end of the motion? Okay, good. All right, we have a motion. I'll second it.
Well, I thought I
All
did,
right.
but
Oh, did you? Okay,
I gotta speak.
all right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. 3-2, the ayes carry. All right, we are on to regular agenda item number 5, which is discussion Okay, update and discussion of possible action on a report from the accessory building and structure subcommittee and recommendation for accessory buildings. Now, I was hoping that Mr. Nash would be here this evening to be able to talk through this first document, and I know Jerry's here to talk through the second document.
Michael Hall.
So, what would you like to do, McGann?
That was it. I just wanted to give you guys some background that Brian did submit his report from that meeting, and Jerry also submitted a report.
Okay.
Yeah,
very
but I didn't.
And Michael was at the meeting as well, I believe.
Yes.
good.
But,
Right,
but did
Mike?
you, I didn't see his, report.
Yes, the report's in the packet.
It's in the packet.
Well, I looked this morning, I didn't see it.
Which?
But anyway,
It was there when it originally went out.
The one, yeah, from Brian
oh,
Nash.
the very, okay,
The first, yeah, the first, we have two documents we're looking at. The first is written by, I
Okay.
think is written by Brian Nash, and then the second one by you, right?
okay.
Okay, and, right, okay, and again, I was hoping that Brian would be here to cover this, but he's not. Michael, can you? I think that you two were, as I understand it, you two were in agreement on these things, and then Jerry is going to have a dissenting opinion on it.
Where is Brian's?
His is at the first.
13?
Page 13, yep.
Okay, here we are.
It's item 5.
Yeah, so basically, again, I kind of go from I don't want to over-regulate things, and I kind of see someone's lot as theirs to use, with the condition that, you know, you shouldn't create a nuisance on your lot, things like that. So that's kind of the way I view or approach it. So when you look at structures on the lot, what we talked about was that, yeah, there may be certain guidelines, like we talked about a height of 15 feet. Like we thought, you know, obviously a 30-foot structure is, you know, in the side yard, things like that is not typically appropriate. But we gave a lot of latitude to like up to 15 feet. It could be 14 feet, you know, something of that nature too. You know, that's not a in stone number. That, you know, you could have a storage shed, or you could have a small accessory building that no one's living out of around your property, kind of where you want to put it. We didn't put it in the front yard, of course, but other than that, there wasn't a lot of restriction. Playscapes were somewhat similar. Basically, you know, based on someone's lot, they may have a really good place they want to put it, which may not easily fit in a bucket if we kind of regulate exactly where you can put them, just not in the front yards. And then I guess tree houses were kind of exempt from regulations. Right now, there's nothing in the code that talks about where you can put those or not.
So, is that kind of it?
That's pretty much what I.
All right, okay. Okay, now Jerry had put together some things, and you want to take us through that, Jerry?
Well, I can just talk it out. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a difference between a playscape and a playhouse, and what you can buy at Lowe's and Home Depot are playscapes. They're components of assembled things that you can just put together and put up in your backyard. And the tallest one I saw was about 11 foot tall, and it wasn't permanently attached to the ground. They had some stakes. And so these open, like jungle gym type items are a different animal than a playhouse, which is more like a building. So playscapes are to me a loose item that it doesn't need a lot of regulation or any at all, just, although other codes mention them, they are not doing a lot of harm because of the height and the openness for drainage, light, airflow, etc. Now, having said that, it's a different animal with playhouses. Playhouses are more like buildings. They've got footings or slabs. They are a structure. They impede airflow, restrict sunlight, etc., and need regulation. And our sister cities regulate them, just like an accessory building, and are not allowed in the setback areas. So they should not be. Now, Westlake Hills allows 5 feet of encroachment, but they have bigger setback distances than we do. I thought of this idea that if you can allow an encroachment into 5 feet into our rear setback for a certain area, there might be on that same site plan, that same yard, open area that will compensate for what you're taking away. Now, the limitations I would put on there would be 10 to 15 feet from the property line, and that the area that you compensate it for would be greater than the area you are using. Okay, and same would apply and up to a certain limit. So that's a complication, but it's an accommodation for people. And I'm open for discussion.
Yeah, here we are, City Council has given us this opportunity to talk about this and say what it is. I think everybody's aware of what actually caused this thing to come up. It was a playhouse that was built up the street here. That is in public view. Looking at the current code, things like playhouses actually are in the code, but they're considered they're secondary structures, building structures. So I think it's up to us to start breaking this down and to say, well, what is allowed and what is not allowed, whenever and maybe talk about them in individual terms, kind of like what Jerry was saying, that we have playscapes and we have playhouses. We haven't even brought up tool sheds yet, I don't think. I haven't heard that yet.
No, that would be an accessory building, along with a bunch of
Well,
other things.
is it? I don't know,
Well,
and
yes, you could
yeah.
put them both the same, and if you treat them both the same. Lakeway has a maximum height of 12 feet. On there, they have a specific ordinance
yeah.
on gazebo, playhouses, playscapes, and permanent installed recreation equipment. So Lakeway makes a special one for that particular case, and then they have accessory buildings. Okay, and under their playscapes, they go up to 12 feet max and located 10 feet from the property line, and may not be located in any setback drainage threat. Now, but Lakeway have to be up. Their setbacks are on the side 5 feet unless you got a golf course, and then it's 25 feet. So
I guess it's
They're
to
the
protect the children from the
everybody's a little different
golf
wrinkle.
balls flying through the air.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Westlake Hill includes
Okay.
playscapes in their accessory structures.
I think the
Okay.
first memo kind of distinguished, because we already have I forget what we wound up calling them. We have accessory
Yeah.
buildings or,
Yeah, I want to get clear on this. Do we actually have an accessory structures definition in our code? We do.
but is that different than an accessory building?
Okay.
Well, I heard this, a accessory building is a structure that's enclosed. there's a,
Okay.
go ahead.
We've got, I think, council members bringing it up. I think it's just accessory building or structure.
Building
It's-
or structure.
It's accessory building or structure
And
is
those are-
the definition.
Okay. What I think
So,
wants to
There
happen.
is no, there
So
is no.
a building, a pool, you know, what we
Right,
would all call a
and
building,
then
a pool
the
house is no
then-
different than,
Then the determination is what is a building and then what is as a structure. So we have a definition for structure, we have a definition for building, and then we have accessory building or structure.
but do we have a clear definition of structure? Because we've got HVAC units.
We have a
would be-
recommendation here for an
Ms.
accessory
Brown.
structure.
I know, I should have
Well, I
pulled
got-
up the existing code,
Yeah.
I don't have.
Do you want, I'll let Brooke read the structure.
Here we go. It's long. There is a definition. Accessory building or structure means a building or structure which does not share a common roof or common wall, including but not limited to a tool house, home workshop, greenhouse, garage, carport, children's playhouse, or swimming pool house, which one is located on the same lot as the as a dwelling. Two is subordinate in area to the dwelling and is used for a purpose customarily incidental to the dwelling. Three is detached from the dwelling except for that a connected foundation or walkway may exist with the dwelling. Four, does not provide complete independent living facilities for one or more persons, which include permanent provisions for living, sleeping, and sanitation facilities. And five, is not used for lease or rental or for a commercial purpose other than a home occupation by a resident of the main dwelling.
Okay.
So really currently a pool house that's designed, engineered, architect, built is not different than a tool shed. They
Which is, yeah,
fall under the same definition.
kinda crazy.
Okay.
Yeah, we were trying to make a distinction, I think, on that, that tool houses, sheds, and things like that should not necessarily be considered the same as a pool house or something, of that much more engineered, typically larger nature.
Right. That's how it looks here and what's being recommended. We arrived at the following high-level conceptual recommendations. That is, accessory structures include structures that may not constitute an, quote, accessory building, but are permanently affixed to the ground in some manner, that is, with concrete footings, such as playhouses, play sets, tool sheds, greenhouses, and other similar structures not intended to be habitable, which seems like a good, at least start for this. You know, we're not talking about,
Well, and I usually start with these is, do we have a problem that we're trying to solve? And I think if we have some of our professional consultants who are interpreting a pad for an AC unit as a structure under that definition, then to me we have a problem
Yeah.
that we need to try to solve.
well, fortunately, we just took care of that piece.
I know, I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
okay.
but we still have,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
if the definition of this building or structure is that
Right.
broad that someone could,
Yeah.
you know,
So what this does is this narrows things down to something that truly is accessory, you know? And, you know, again, I think it's a good start. You know, you're talking, I don't think that, you know, that, for instance, playhouses ought to be in the same thing as a workshop. A workshop may not have any plumbing, but it's gonna have electricity, it's a much larger unit, whatever, I think it's the same, it's a different thing. We could put, square footage requirements here, you know, say, well, accessory structure is something that can't exceed a certain square footage and footprint size.
and you're making a distinction when you say that between structure and building?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so.
Right now, they're grouped together,
Right.
yeah,
One other comment.
Yeah.
And that is that the code does only allow one accessory structure
Yeah.
building
yeah, that's
Per-
probably a
per
problem
lot-
too.
Per lot.
per lot.
That's right, and that's a problem, you know, so you
I
can't have a total.
remember, I'm surprised, I remember there were, this was before any of y'all were
Yeah.
on, we had a lot of discussion
Yeah.
around this and did make some changes, because what started happening was, you know, because there was that distinction on connectivity, people were building a separate garage or a separate pool house or whatever, and running some sort of, you know, roof line thing to kind of get around it, basically. And
So it's
we
not
said-
separate.
So we kind of said, like, do any of us on planning and zoning at that time, you know, care all that much about this, so long as you're building within the building footprint, right? If somebody says, I want one big house that's 4,500 square feet, or I want a 3,500 square feet, and for some reason I want to detach it and have another 1,000 square feet, it's all within the building footprint. Do we care? And at the time we said, no, we don't care. I think at one point we even said, for the most part, we didn't care if it were two of them. And I think maybe, I don't remember how it wound up with just one, but it may have been that people thought that was too big of an invitation to build something where you can rent things out or whatever. That was the background of that. And I think I remember that the structure versus building came up, and I don't remember if we didn't have the energy or anybody, city council and otherwise, had the desire to get more into it. But I think, you know, looking at it now, structure versus building seems like a worthy distinction to try.
Yeah, it seems, you know, a lot of the stuff that we do, or it's handed to us, is predicated on a single incident that kind of shines a light on, well, we have some weakness in our code that we haven't really handled well and probably needs to be resolved. And I think that trying to separate, you know, the larger object, the larger building from the playground equipment and things like that is a good idea. I don't think they should be grouped together.
Yeah, the devil's always in the details, but an idea would be you can have a accessory building that we all think of as a building, and you can have one accessory structure that's
And
some other
perhaps we
definition.
need a definition for accessory building.
Yeah, I think we have probably a good start on that if you just sort of bifurcated structure off of that definition. That
Well, there's stuff
just-
in, what,
Yeah.
what Councilmember Brown had just read to us, you know, groups so many things together that probably just plain should not be. And if we could extract those things, you know, that definition works pretty well for a lot of things, but not everything there. And if we could extract those things that shouldn't be in there and then make separate definitions or, you know, allowables around those, that might be what we're being asked to do.
Yeah, like.
And I do
likewise.
know from when we went through this before, and as always is the case, the devil's in the details. It gets, you know, complicated, but it
Well,
seems like it's something we should start to try to do.
We actually, you know, the HVAC and the, you know, the pool equipment and the generators, that was kind of a nice lead into this because it got some of the discussion that needs to happen around these other things as well. Got it started. Yes.
I have a question. One of the details that seems to be important is whether or not it is placed permanently affixed to the ground.
Yes.
And I just have a question. Is the playhouse that started all this, is it permanently affixed to the ground, or is it just on some?
Well, for safety reasons, you're gonna always wanna, you know, pour footers and things and put that kind of thing in the ground, yeah. You know, a swing set is effectively permanently set in the ground. Doesn't mean you're gonna have it there in 15 years, but whenever you do set it in there, it's a permanent fixture effectively.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the definition of permanent, right? Nothing's
Yeah.
permanent. We're tearing all these houses down, so they're not
Yeah,
permanent either, right?
it's as
True.
permanent as a house that's being torn
Yeah.
down. But,
But to get to your point, you
excuse me.
you can break this out like Lakeway did and have gazebo, playhouse, playscapes.
Okay, good.
And then all the rest can be in the accessory building or structures. And there's other things we haven't even talked about too. There's saunas and I got chicken coops next door and a whole myriad of ideas of things that can be in your backyard. Trampolines, some people talk about them.
Well-
But it's specifically, we're gonna address that and then have a general for the rest. But the basic principle that I would have is to keep the setback areas clear because of the prevailing building trends to the building lines, which leaves you no area for your yard except the required yard. and I'm still trying to figure it out, but you can see the new construction going on and see that they're going as much as they can. And our Rolling Wood character is suffering as a result. It's that little area, as I mentioned before, is the only area you're gonna have left for natural scapes and trees and items. I think it's precious, and it needs to be guarded vigorously. There's other areas that they can build. Or we do have big lots, huge lots, that they have room to put all kinds of stuff in. So that,
We have large setbacks too, relative to our big
no,
neighbors.
no, we don't.
Bigger than Lakeway, bigger than
Well,
Austin.
how
Yeah.
many places,
We
that's
discussed
the
a lot.
one little point, but you look at Westlake Hills,
Well,
they
Their
go-
their average
Westlake
lot
is
is over an acre.
A lot of it, yeah.
So we have large lots compared to Austin and Lakeway. We have small lots compared to Westlake Hills.
I wouldn't call our buildable area percent-wise is pretty high versus a lot of places, in most places. And it's over 50%.
Austin, Lakeway, yeah. I mean,
Well, us.
depends what you're
So
comparing it
you're,
to.
you know, it's a matter then, of course, of how precious do you want to retain that setback area for the natural area?
I
And
highly value it. I'm not
Yeah.
overly concerned about playscapes and
Well,
whether
I'm
they're built
not,
or
I'm
bought.
not, playscapes is easy to play houses, you know, and if
I'm fine with play houses too.
well, I think it's also
At
could
least
be,
of the ilk that's been built.
well, it's part, ought to be, complaint driven too. And back in the old days, you know, Tom Farrell said that, don't ask me, just
If you
go
put it
do
in code, it's not complaint driven, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And we haven't had many complaints.
Well-
That one playhouse was even not a complaint. It was actually city staff driving by, noticing it, and then saying, hey, what is this? And that's where that came from.
I
So it
know.
even wasn't a complaint at
But
that point.
so, with that in mind, I think a good starting point would be to look at the current code and what is in that definition for structure of buildings and remove those things from there, make a motion to remove those things that don't appear to be correctly placed there. You know, most of what's written there, that probably works pretty well for certain things. But there are things within that first line that probably maybe playhouses and things like that, maybe we can pull those out so that they can be handled separately. But in order to do that, we need to get it away from, we need to separate it out.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think we need to discuss it holistically. I mean, I don't think we should vote to pull those out of the existing ordinance right now unless we're planning to fully vet how those are gonna be handled going
I
forward.
think that's what we're gonna do.
We're gonna knock all that out tonight?
We're not gonna get there tonight, but I think, we need a starting point. And I
Well,
don't think we
should
have one.
discuss an outline before we start removing things from code personally. An outline of what exactly we wanna remove, how exactly we wanna regulate those things going forward that we've removed. I mean, I don't know, I personally would like to study the code.
Here, to Michael's point, the reason why this playhouse came into discussion is because the way the code is written now, it was in violation of the code. And the question
Which
is,
was debated
and should
heavily,
it be in violation of the code? And my view is, no, it shouldn't. It shouldn't even been raised. But the code is what it is today. So anybody right now who wants to build a similar playhouse has to go through the same rigmarole that those neighbors did. Okay, so to me, we would be doing the city a service if, at the very least, we took that piece out of the code and said, we're gonna handle that separately.
I completely agree, I just don't think we're in a position to do that tonight.
So I have a question,
Okay.
so that
I mean,
structure,
I haven't even, I mean, I need to get my.
Well, I guess
I
I had
need a
hoped,
few minutes to read the existing.
I
code.
had hoped that the subcommittee would have come up with some more things that were that we could action on, but I don't know that we have something we can action on.
Well, I have a question. So the structure that everybody's talking about.
Yeah,
Did it, go through a building approval process? So it was not approved, okay.
Right.
No permits were filed, okay.
Yeah, no permits were filed, and that's what kind of brought it on to
Okay.
the topic of everything.
Okay.
And then that's when it had come to, city council, and they had made the motion to, what's the word? Abate, there we go.
Abating enforcement, we're not abating the code. we're
Right,
abating
enforcement on it.
on that property.
So it was concluded that it definitely was not code compliant. That, I didn't hear
Correct.
the final version of that, okay.
That came from legal counsel.
So they were asking for forgiveness rather than permission.
They didn't know they needed
They
permission.
didn't
I think was
know,
their
right.
position, yeah.
Okay.
I do think, we've been asked to do this. This is,
Oh, we were asked by the council? to
yeah,
do
yeah,
this?
this has come to us from
Make a
city council.
recommendation.
Yeah, to make a
Oh,
recommendation.
okay. I didn't realize that.
To study it and make a recommendation.
Well, I actually like the recommendations that the committee came up with respect to the 12-foot, 14-foot height and the accessory structures definition. I think from a cursory perspective, it looks good to me, but I did not study it in detail, so I'm not sure that I feel comfortable about voting on anything tonight, but, I do think that what the committee put together was pretty, commonsensical, really. I mean, pretty good, yeah.
All right.
And Jerry, I did appreciate reading on your report about the rubberized, mulch. I read
Yeah,
the whole
that-
thing that you sent. It was interesting, cause I've always wondered about that.
Well, we ought to ban it, but that came about when you looked at the play requirements and how much you have softening material for a fall.
Right.
And above 8 feet, they only recommend that shredded rubber stuff. So, that ought to be a condition on the playhouses, that you consider the fall spot and how much they're gonna put
That you
at the
basically
bottom.
use,
I'm personally fine with people self-regulating their fall.
I understand that, right, I got to that point, too, but it was, even the playscapes wanted to be 6 foot, 6 inches away from a fence or an obstacle, which gets us, to me, to our 10 feet away from the property line, distance. So if we wanna get into a separate one for playscapes and playhouses, there'll be stuff to talk about.
Well, again, we were charged to do something here. And I think that the code is in error and not complete enough. And that, yes, the work that has gone on so far by this subcommittee, is admirable. Both the first document and the second document. But I don't think that any of it is right actionable yet. And we need to get it into some kind of a form where we're all agreeing and understanding this is what the way forward is for this code change. So,
well, can we, I think we all are in agreement that we would like to redefine what is in the existing code and separate those structures.
yes,
So can we move that the committee, made up of Jerry, Michael, and Brian, be tasked with trying to pull out the structures that, should not be in the existing code and should be separated into a separate code.
Well, I,
Or was that more intended to be a one-session spitball, and then we're supposed to?
I
take
think
it
that
further.
one session was enough for me.
Yeah, I don't know if we would need to
Yeah.
get crazy on this, but basically what I think we kind of came up with was there's certain things like a shed, a playscape that's not on a grand scale, right? That we didn't want to regulate and micromanage exactly where somebody could put them and even how many they could have, right? If you have small storage sheds, why do we care if you have 3 or 1, you know? If, so that was,
As
at
long
least
as they're
Brian
in
and I
public
really felt
view.
that. Now Jerry might have a little bit of a,
Yeah,
More-
I'm still trying to get the hang of a lot of this that you guys been at for years. I haven't been here quite a year yet. So I'm, right, I have evolving and different thoughts.
yeah, I think,
Yeah,
you
well,
know,
yeah.
I guess we're, I am a little more less regulation on stuff unless there's a reason to regulate it. I would rather, you know, like pull it out and say we don't need to regulate storage sheds, we don't need to regulate playhouses. At least maybe say you could determine what a playhouse is by saying it's not taller than X, it's not bigger than X, it doesn't have this. You can define those things, but then say we're not going to regulate it. If somebody tries to say this is a playhouse and they pour a slab and they put a electric there and they, you know, put running water, then obviously that's not a playhouse. So if you define it, you know, correctly. So I think that's possible to just take certain things out of there and say this is okay.
Yeah, that's,
Okay,
That's
so
it.
that,
And I don't think that takes a lot of time. We could do it in committee or we can do it, you know, as a group here.
I would love to see it come to us from committee.
Well,
Because I get the sense that nobody thinks that we can get this passed tonight, which is fine.
Well, I
But
mean, we
have
can,
to
we
have
can
a
start
way
trying to
forward.
narrow in,
Whatever
I
it is
think,
we're
for
doing, we have to
discussion.
know where we're going with it.
I mean, I think we
Okay.
can certainly discuss it and narrow in. I mean, we have two kind of, not two versions, but these two documents, the one in the original packet and Jerry's, have some things that are not consistent.
Yeah.
So we can talk about whether we like
right.
which of the inconsistent items we like more than the other. And I think the original report says up to 14 feet in height. It says that those structures, which include playhouses, play sets, so houses and play sets, tool sheds, greenhouses, etc., that are not habitable, should be less than 15 feet in height if they are located within a minimum yard. So this allows for them to be in the minimum yard so long as they're below a certain height, whether they are a constructed playhouse or a, you know, purchased and assembled play set. So that's what that one says, right? And then Jerry's says a playscape is something you buy, a playhouse is something you build, and a playscape should not be 11 feet versus 15 feet on the other one, and 6'6" to any fence, building, or obstacle, which I had a question of why on that. And then he has a restriction on fall distance. So any opinion on those from others? Do you,
We can look at each one of these things and decide whether or not they make sense. But I think before we get to that, we have to agree what is in fact an accessory structure versus an accessory building.
Okay, so do you
Okay,
like
That's the first.
playhouses, play sets, tool sheds, greenhouses, and other similar structures, or is that? Should we change that?
No, I think that's perfectly fine. But do those things come out of what the current code says?
I think they would have to based on what we're
Then,
talking
then
about.
let's
yeah.
start there, okay? Let's look at those words there and say, okay, first off, we're making new rules around those things, and they are not the rule that is on the books today.
Yeah, I guess my question is, do we make a motion to remove those before we've discussed how tall they are and where they can go.
And it's a chicken and an egg kind of thing, but yeah, I think so. I think that we remove things that are probably not properly placed in the code first, and then create code around, or at least recommend code changes. It's only a recommendation, Tony,
Yeah, I know.
right? I mean, but we have to start somewhere. I mean, just because we say we think that's the way to do it, that doesn't mean that's going to happen.
Okay, yeah, I would.
But if we
I would
agree
do it a little
that, yeah,
differently,
we need
but
to
I'm fine
break
with
those
that.
things out, well, that's a good start.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, good. So, Councilmember Brown, I am having trouble finding that exact wording in this code. I'm finding a lot of,
Yeah, I've got 10777 as accessory buildings.
107, is that the one?
Well, it's not what Brooke read exactly.
It's in the definition section,
Accessory buildings,
107-3.
107,
If you're looking for the definition.
okay.
107-3.
Is that what we're looking,
Accessory building or structure definition. Is that what you're looking for?
that's what I'm, yeah, what it was that you read to us earlier.
I beg your pardon?
What it was that you read to us earlier.
107-3,
Thank you.
definition for accessory building or structure.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
and there's a definition for structure in there too.
I beg your pardon?
There's a definition for structure.
Yes, there is that as well.
And then I'm seeing another,
But they're all, the definitions are all in 107-3.
I'm seeing another one, 107-77, that's titled accessory buildings.
That's the code provision that applies to those defined buildings.
Okay. What I'm going to motion is that within section 107-3 definitions, under accessory building and structure definition, I would like to remove from that definition children's playhouse and tool house.
Well, I wouldn't do tool house.
We can
But
identify.
not greenhouse.
I'm sorry?
I mean,
But not greenhouse?
I know,
I don't know.
I
I don't know
think,
if we have any.
I would remove tool house, shed, playhouse.
Shed's not in there, yeah, just tool house.
Okay, well, I'm in the
Which I
middle
guess
of a
must-
motion here,
must be
so
a
I
shed,
can,
right, that's what I mean,
I
I
can
think-
restate, yeah, okay. Okay, remove, going back, from this 107-3 accessory building and structure definition, I would, I would first, I think, eliminate structure. Take it out of there. So this definition becomes accessory building only. Okay? And we could make it accessory building means a building which does not share common roof or common wall, including but not limited to home workshop, garage, carport, which is located on the same lot as dwelling.
How about swimming pool house?
I think swimming pool house could be substantial enough to
I think it
be
should stay.
considered an accessory building.
Okay, yeah, you didn't read it for staying in, I just wanted to make sure.
I'm sorry?
You didn't, you were reading what should stay in and you didn't.
Oh, I'm
read
sorry,
swimming
yeah,
pool.
yeah, okay, right, okay, thank you, you're right.
I don't have the motion. Yeah, I don't understand the motion.
Okay,
Sorry.
my motion is, first off, to change the definition from accessory building or structure to accessory building only.
May I caution you there?
Also,
If the intent is to remove things like playhouses or sheds from regulation under this provision, then I would recommend that you not remove or structure, because that term is used in various ways throughout the rest of the code that have nothing to do with playhouses or sheds. And so you're changing, that would be a very significant change from a permitting point of view. You can accomplish the same thing by simply removing playhouse or shed from that definition rather than structure.
okay, here's the reason I want to do it, is because I think I want, and you can set me straight on this, but I think instead of, we want a separate definition around accessory structures.
The problem is you can have a new definition for the term accessory structure.
Okay.
That's not a defined term currently.
Right.
Yes, but structure is a defined term in the code, and you can have both an accessory building or an accessory structure.
Yeah.
And if you remove or structure, then you're probably affecting the permit process for true structures that you don't want to impact.
Okay, well, here's the conundrum.
That's not within the discussion of playhouses and sheds and.
If we put together a definition for accessory structure, wouldn't that be in conflict with this if we don't remove it?
You would probably need to use a different term for that.
Okay.
So, and, you can have a defined term. It's easier to come up with a new defined term for sheds and playhouses than it is to change the code with respect to all the permitting provisions that would apply to a structure.
Okay, thank you for that guidance, that's good, all right.
I have another
got
quick
it.
question.
I got it.
For
Okay.
Councilwoman Brown. When the last meeting, I forget it was the last one or one before, Charlie was here and made a point relative to something else of like, we're not charged with writing the code.
That's
We're
right.
charged with recommending things around the code that can be, obviously would have to be approved by city council and then written properly. Would we be, from your perspective on council, would we be better off trying to make motions around specific code changes, or should we be going more in the direction of, here's the spirit of what we think we should head down and write code in support of, if y'all approve it? Should we be giving more of a report?
I'll let our city council address that,
So I'll
our
just
city attorney.
say, I will clarify, I'm the planner, I'm not your attorney, but I'll give you sort of what other cities typically do. Typically P&Z and city council, when they want amendments to the code, they'll give their opinions and everything that they'd like to see in it. And then city staff will go back, write up what they believe was your intent and bring it in front of you, and then y'all would go through that and either agree with some things, agree to remove some things. It's easier that way, in my opinion, when you have the facts in front of you of like, this is what the intent is. I would highly suggest looking at everything all together instead of doing it in pieces, like removing structure from the definition without actually having requirements around it. I mean, you can do that. It's just you're always running into like, if you do that first and you don't have requirements around it, someone could turn in a permit and they're vested under those requirements where there are none, and so they can do what they want with it. So it'd be better to have sort of everything done together.
Dave, I'm wondering if we shouldn't just try to, we've got a lot of it right here. If we
Right.
shouldn't just say bullet points of here's what we're, and I don't know if we make a motion that this is what we approve and send to council, or if it's just, here's a bullet point summary of what we, got some general agreement around, and
Right.
city council, are we on the right track? And, obviously then code's gotta be written at some point.
I think that's right, I just don't think we have that.
Yeah, I think
what-
we
what-
need to do that.
You know, in the, well, Okay, even if we came up with a set of bullet points, each one of those would have to be a separate motion, don't you think?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No, you don't?
Well,
Okay.
and
I
I'm
mean, I think it'd
wondering,
be like a report. Like
right, that's
yeah.
what I'm wondering, why can't we, based on what, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Amanda.
Amanda just said, why can't we submit these two reports to our city staff and request that they blend them to, and come back to us next month with a proposed, I don't know if I want to say change, but with a final report, I guess. And then we can approve it and send it on up to the council. But let the city staff kind of tweak what it is.
You know,
I
Well,
mean,
the
there are two
reports
reports.
contradict each other a little
I
bit,
know,
so I
and
think we
so
need
they
to
can-
talk about what we
But
want
they can
there.
blend them, and then they can say, what do you all think about these two where they're, you know, where they do contradict each other, and we can vote on those.
What do you think, Nikki?
I will do what you wish.
Okay, all right.
I'll tell you what I would
I-
propose.
You know, if, may I work with you on that? Try to harmonize these things.
I would, if y'all don't mind. If y'all want to go off of, per se, these are the two reports that we're submitting to make changes from, we can do that. Or y'all can come up with going down that list and say, we like this, 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 we don't like this, we don't like this, period. Or going down each one of those and saying, this has no reasoning. Or you could say along those lines of, we like the definition, we don't like these things. I guess specifically come back with a task or motion a task, and as specific as possible with that task.
Okay.
Because the more specific you are with that task, the more we're gonna come back with what you're looking for. Now, if you just want a report, it's probably going to end up very similar to what we have before us. We're not really moving forward. So I think if y'all can try to come to a consensus of what do we not want or what do we want, and then we will move forward with that idea and bring that to you.
Okay.
And that is just a suggestion on how, but being on this side and working with it, it's better to just have that specific of what you want, what you don't want, and we'll word it together.
I think that's helpful. I think that the most fleshed out document we have in front of us is this first report. And Jerry's highlights some different opinions on specific pieces of that. What if we just go through this report substantively and kind of say, you know, as an example, how do we feel about 15 feet? How do we feel about where they can go?
Well,
And then we can kind of have a version of this modified.
okay, I'm gonna go back to this again. Before we get there, and I think it'd be great if we do that, can we decide which of the things that are in the current definition, that we would apply those things to?
Yeah, that's in this report. Yeah, so
Okay.
I think they've got a proposed list here. So I was thinking we maybe make changes to this report as we
Okay,
want to.
I'm gonna leave this out because I'm not sure that it's comprehensive, that it's got,
They line up pretty well.
includes structures and make accessory around such as playhouses, play sets, tool sheds, greenhouses, and other similar structures not intended to be, which is a nice broad statement,
Yeah, I think it incorporates the things that you were striking when you
but
started. here.
it doesn't, let's see, greenhouses is in there. All right. All right.
May
Good
I?
enough, close enough, okay?
Close enough. Well,
Hmm? Close enough as far as listing things, at least as a starting point. Why don't we start with that? Do we feel comfortable that that defines what it is we're talking about?
Where are you reading from?
I'm reading from the first report that was submitted,
It's, page 13 at the bottom.
okay?
Here.
At the bottom, we arrived at the following high-level conceptual recommendations. Accessory structures includes.
This would be kind of the start of, if we started trying to get this to code, you could define accessory
Right.
structure like you were talking about.
But this is our starting point, and the fact that there are other similar structures not intended to be habitable, that's kind of a nice thing. I kind of like that.
So I personally like that bullet point.
Okay,
I do as well.
okay. Jerry, do you like it?
No,
You don't.
no.
Just, and then forget about where they go, but just defining
Well,
the items that aren't a
I
building.
think the subject is gonna be so broad and intricate, you're gonna get bogged down in a bunch of details, and I think the specific thing is playhouse. And I would
No.
like to just say, let's focus on making an ordinance on playhouse, playscapes, gazebos, and other permanently installed recreation equipment like Lakeway did. It keeps it specific, simple,
And what do you think about tool sheds?
no, tool sheds are variable. There could be storage, it could be anything. It
So are
could
they
be a
allowed or are they
wide-
not allowed?
I'm saying it's not up for discussion. It's in accessory buildings, and you already went through this, a couple of years ago on how embroiled that involved. I think you're gonna get bogged down in all the things you could have in a backyard. And I think a subject from Kevin Gansher is the playhouse.
So you're saying that you would prefer that we, as a body, focus our recommendations specifically on playhouses?
Correct.
That wasn't what we were tasked with.
That
We
is
were
not.
tasked with the whole,
That-
looking at the structures,
I
looking
don't-
at the code and deciding,
Yeah,
what we
well,
were identifying to be.
I haven't been here a year, but I can be here a couple more.
Well, I think what Michael's saying is we got instruction from city council to make recommendations on this holistically. Is that accurate?
Right, yeah, and to look at what we came up with as accessory structures, versus accessory building, and we thought that was a distinction there that we might flesh out more to be able to remove the playhouses, sheds and things like that are not
And I'm for that.
necessarily needing the regulation the same way a pool house is that's engineered and built and of a certain size.
Well,
We did talk about, I don't see it in here, like a square footage. We talked about like staying under 250, I believe, square feet on those buildings. So
yeah.
like if it went above, then yeah, that would be
I think
into
the
the next
topics are
category.
so broad and many, you won't have a consensus, or you'll get bogged down. You better just stay specific if you wanna get something done in a month or two.
Well, are there any other accessory structures that you could include with playhouses if you did make it more specific? Is there any?
Well, I'm looking at Lakeway, and they've got playscapes, which is very similar, gazebos, which is different, I wouldn't do that. I just do the recreation equipment. And playhouses will get you into a structure and and its implications, because it involves a lot, and we're gonna, whether it's allowed in the setback area or not, that's gonna be a hang-up. So, there we are, and and to me, this is minor compared to the building height. I think it's a sidetrack we got turned away on. So, that would be my motion. We propose
I personally think we could treat all those things
Yeah.
the same. So I don't know that it does bog us down any further than we might get bogged down on just
Yeah, I-
playscapes personally.
Yeah,
Well-
we're gonna put some constraints around this whole group of things that could include height and girth or whatever, or where they're allowed to be positioned. To a large extent, I think they ought to be all treated the same way. If it looks like there needs to be an exception to that, then maybe we have to take that thing out, but I don't see it.
Well, I see, area lighting, what you do in these buildings, their function, their square footage, their height, you know?
We've got, the accessory buildings already defined, there's limitation on height and
Right.
square footage in the code.
And,
I think the question now is, do we include all these things, or are we just talking about
Yeah, and
landscapes?
I don't know whether we need to take this through a motion to do that. That was kind of what my question was earlier.
Well, I
Do
thought
we
maybe
have
we
to-
go through there and see if we have any consensus on even,
I-
which
I-
we're not
I
doing very well so
think-
far.
I think aside from Jerry, I think we actually do have consensus on this particular thing. And if there's something you want to add or to it, I think we could talk, but I don't think I want to take anything away from it.
Well, and I guess I'd also point out, Brian, he doesn't count because he's not here, but he did write this report, so it's probably a decent depiction of where he sits on it since he wrote it.
Well, since he wrote it, yeah, I kind of see that as tacit approval to go forward with the way it is,
Right.
don't you? May we move on to the next step? Or-
Okay, so we talked about that one, we kind of know where everybody stands on that.
Right,
yeah.
okay. To Councilmember Brown's point earlier, do we need to change that word accessory structure and make it something else?
I think that's for code writing where we can have that defined where it works with everything else.
All
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I think now I'm hoping
Is that
we can
right?
get a
Okay,
set of
thumbs up on
guidelines
that?
to them. They
Okay.
can say, this looks
All right.
good, doesn't look good, and then
Just-
we, I mean,
Yeah, I don't
ultimately
want
we'd
to
have
get
to have a
tangled up in
pub-
language either.
I mean,
yeah.
ultimately,
Okay.
before any of this is done, we have to have a public hearing, right? Because it's in the zoning code, so,
it'll have to go through code review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take the terms.
Yeah,
yeah.
And make sure that they're not in conflict with something
Right.
else in the code.
So I think we were saying, we think we should have accessory structure, call it what you want, but like a new defined thing that includes
may we
these
make that a
items.
recommendation?
Well, I think we should
Without
get through
getting
it
into
all.
words.
I think we should get through it all, and then
Yeah,
yeah.
Here's, just from my point of view.
Yeah.
I think you need to go through the whole set, so people have the committee members have an idea of what this would look like, and then take a vote, or go through and just say, we have consensus here, have staff draft up something and bring it back with more detailed language at the next meeting.
Y'all can always change it.
But I don't think you have to get formal on a motion at this point.
Yeah, I think now we've talked about this first bullet point. We haven't voted. We're not in full consensus, but we kind of have an idea where everybody stands. I think we can kind of get to that same point on these, and then see if we want to make a motion around this, or if we're giving
Okay.
guidance to staff. Or
well, I guess my concern is with all that is that if there is not complete agreement on each one of these points, then the larger motion might get defeated just based on
we
someone's
may not even make a
dissatisfaction.
motion. Yeah, I mean, I think we decide on that after we've gone through this.
Can we at least just go to the next bullet?
Let's do it. Okay, I'm fine with that. Okay. Accessory structures should be permitted within the minimum side yards or backyards, but such structures should be less than 15 feet in height for portions that are within the minimum yard portions. We debate, okay.
So the main questions here are you okay with these things being in the required side yards and backyards, yes or no?
Yeah,
And then whether you say yes or no, what height are you okay with? There's two separate things.
Yeah, what does this mean, that are within the minimum yard portions?
It's required.
that the
yards,
required
how it
yards,
should be written.
that's what they mean.
So that's question
Yeah.
number one, that we can talk about.
Are these
we
things
okay
allowed?
with these things, which we've just said, general consensus includes playhouses, play sets, tool sheds. Are we okay with those in required side yards and required backyard setbacks?
Okay,
Inside the setbacks, inside the yards, okay,
Right.
the required yards, okay.
right.
I
The idea
would be
was-
within a certain height, although I think I would probably limit it, whether it's, I think you mentioned 5 feet somewhere. I mean, I don't think we should have a 15-foot playscape, tool shed, whatever, shoved against the property line. So I think I would be okay with it encroaching into the required setback or backyard by some amount.
The backyard, the side yard?
I would be okay with it, provided I probably wouldn't want something 15 feet.
See,
As an example, I have a
See,
a
these are
shed
two-
that's
yeah,
about
yeah.
the height of my fence.
Yeah,
that's in the side
these are
setback.
two different things, you know, their placement and their height. And I don't know whether you want to take them together. I'm not sure that's a good idea.
Well, I think, to me, that height does matter with where it goes.
It does matter. Oh, okay, so then kind of like what we had just done with our other HVAC and so on equipment, we could say allowed in the side yard but not 15 feet tall, that kind
No
of.
closer than 5 feet,
No.
as an example, to the property line. These are examples.
Yeah. Why don't we take it yard by yard?
I think it's a good way to do it.
Okay? So would we say these accessory structures are permitted within the front yard?
No.
No,
Required front yard?
no.
Not permitted, okay, we got that. All right? We say these things are permitted within the required backyard.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay?
Again, to a point, I don't think it should be against the rear lot line.
Well, there's a lot of
What are
ifs and
pools or
conditions.
pool decking, I believe, can go to
Within
5 feet.
I think a lot of it does have to do with the height.
So we put a restriction on there? We
Yeah,
allow-
the pool itself has to be in the.
If we put a restriction on there, Jerry, will you go with it?
No, there's other things. Besides the height, 15 feet is way too big. I think I'd get into, safety of a 8-foot fall. And maybe you guys don't want to do that or not, but I do. And there's other considerations.
I definitely don't want to get into.
Well,
Fall.
so I keep it out. I don't know what's left on
Well,
this.
height
I
is
mean,
not
do we-
just
then we- do we-
playhouse.
do
We're
we
talking
set a
about
rule that kids
sheds
can't
and
climb
things
trees
too
because
that are
of
not.
that?
Well,
Nobody's
let's
gonna
talk
fall
about
off the shed.
placement first. We'll talk about placement first, and then we can talk about height. Okay, so right now we're talking about backyard, but required yards. Will we permit them? I thought I heard at least 3 people say that, yeah, we would allow that. Would there be a constraint on that from the?
My opinion on side and back is no closer than 5 feet to,
No
to the-
closer
to the
than 5
property
feet
line.
from the property line. We haven't
And
done
I'm open
side
to-
yard yet. We haven't done side yard.
that's my minimum that I would be.
Okay, all right, okay. So would we say 5 yard from the rear lot line, 5 feet?
Rear, I'd be open to 5 to 10, I guess I'd say. Bare minimum 5 feet. I mean, I don't have a real strong, I'm kind of okay with being a little more loosey-goosey about this, but I
okay.
don't want it any more closer than 5 feet.
Yes,
One concern I have,
okay,
and I'm just raising this for consideration.
yes,
If you look at some of the things here, playhouses, tool sheds, greenhouses, other structures, all of those have roofs.
yep,
All will create drainage issues. If you remove those from accessory building or structure, they're going to be outside of the stormwater that are created by those roofs, and you need to think about whether or not you want to give consideration to the stormwater that's created by these structures. If you have also removed this from the number of buildings or the square footage, if there's not a number of buildings or square footage, then you could have a significant amount of additional stormwater created by these accessory structures. So that's something else to think about. It just occurred to me
yeah.
that
I can respond to that.
it occurred to me that by removing the other kinds of regulatory requirements in the code, like one structure per one accessory structure per lot, you could conceivably have a tool shed and a greenhouse and a pool house and a playhouse, and you could effectively cover everything in the buildable area. But I think that whether, you've also got to address whether or not you want drainage from these structures to be a permitted requirement.
Okay. Under the current code, both TCEQ and the DCM, if a structure is being built on a lot and it is less than 200 square feet, it does not require a drainage plan,
I think it's 250.
okay? So,
250.
if these things,
That's
what we
built
could do is,
separately from the time the house is built, right?
it wouldn't matter, once a house is built, okay, and a drainage plan for that house is in place, this 200 square foot rule starts all over again. You don't have to do anything else until you exceed 200 square feet.
250.
Now, if,
250.
is it
250
250?
square feet. Yeah.
It's 250, thank you.
Yeah, because that's why
Stephen,
we
okay.
came up with that.
So, taken collectively, we could say you can have a tool shed, a play set, playhouse, and all that stuff. As long as the combination of those things don't exceed 250 feet, it is not material enough to be considered. As is, yeah.
I don't know it that well enough to know
Okay.
that that's.
Okay.
You're hoping it's not a problem.
But if
there,
you remove the permitting, you know, I'd have to look at the way the drainage code is written and what is considered a structure for purposes of that drainage, and I don't know that well enough to address that.
Okay, okay.
and
I mean, certainly, if you're building something, it's going to need to be permitted. I think that should be a core thesis here. If it's an accessory building, then whether it's built at the same time as the original house later, I mean, it's gotta be permitted.
Well, one of the things that we may be recommending here is whether or not these things, like play sets and stuff, actually are required, are they required to be permitted? Would we
Yeah, I
recommend?
think we're saying no, right? Yeah.
I don't know. What I just heard you say a second ago, I felt was in conflict with the second statement.
I'm saying a building,
Right, okay.
I thought, yeah, we were talking about
Okay.
structure versus building.
Right.
I'm saying a building
Cool.
is permitted, a building's a building, you know, that somebody's
Which is
building.
When you start
Exactly,
adding
that- which is
water,
part of-
electricity.
Which is part of the
that's
reason
gotta
why
be
you
permitted.
separate them out. One requires,
Right, I think we've
Permit
already gotten to
size.
there,
Right,
right? We got
yeah.
building and structure separate.
Cool.
Agreed.
okay, but we could say that even within our recommendations, that these things that we're talking about do not require a permit.
I think that's kind of the point with this, and so we need to decide if we're going, yeah, are people comfortable without having these being permitted? But I think that's kind of the point, is to find out what we're comfortable not being permitted and considered a building.
yeah,
I would say that I would be comfortable with it not being permitted as long as, we had the public viewing screening
Yes.
appropriate. I agree with Jerry. I think 15 feet's too high. So especially if you're gonna build it 5 feet from the property line, I think 15 feet's too high. But, 12 feet, maybe 14, I don't know. But-
See, I don't know if you can screen it, like picture the one that came up. I mean, they're on a sloped lot. You can see their entire backyard.
Yeah, I know.
So there's no,
Still, let's,
build it, aside from building a 10-foot wall.
let's make sure we've got at least general consensus around this, about positioning.
Yeah, you're right.
About,
That
are
is
these things we're talking about here, not allowed in the front yard, allowed in the backyard with some distance from the property line? What is that? I heard 5, is that what we want?
I wouldn't want 15 feet at
Would you
5
want
feet
10?
either, you know.
Would you want 10?
Why don't we do tenting? Just a joke.
So,
I don't know, to me, part of the issue is whether or not they're physically attractive.
we can't get into that.
No, I know, I don't mean,
Yeah.
Well, that's what I think, like screening an AC unit, a generator, you
Yeah.
know, I'm totally on board with that. I mean, I
And-
don't know,
and I
playscape, of course,
think-
there may be one I don't like as much as the other, but I don't think they're generally offensive, you know.
I
As a
agree,
general
but sometimes storage sheds they're pretty ugly.
Well,
Yeah.
And sometimes,
Well, and a storage shed is not 15 feet tall either, or it certainly
Well-
shouldn't be. I mean, the general storage shed,
Yeah.
I don't know, mine's,
Okay,
I can stand up in it, it's probably 6 feet tall.
okay.
well, and see, that's an appropriate height.
Yeah, for a
Okay,
storage
what-
shed, a
I
playscape's
still, I
gotta be
wanna
taller
talk
than
about
that.
positioning, we'll talk about what the right height is in a minute, okay?
Well, I think
But-
they go
Okay,
together.
assuming that it's
I
the
think
right
they
height,
go
whatever that is, how far from the property line should it be? Whatever the right height
I
is.
can't really
well,
distinguish
I'm
those
not
two.
for
They
anything
go
in the
together for me.
setback without, careful consideration or something else. And you've got public utility easements, you have a
And
drainage
they're generally
area.
5 feet from the fence.
Well, they could be 7.5 or 10.
Could,
out
that, well,
public, and you're taking away and filling up the required yard, which is your minimum yard. So, with who knows what and what they'll build in the future, if they're 6 or 8 feet, if nobody complains, nobody will probably even know about it. So that will happen, and it has happened, and it's all over, and nobody's complained, and I don't really see a problem with that. But you need to keep out of the setback areas. That's my position.
yeah.
And that changed from the first meeting to now,
That's right.
correct? Yeah.
I changed. I got, up into the, being accommodating in the meeting. 15-minute meeting, and thought more about it later, and I'm still thinking about it and doing some research.
This is one
So, I would vigorously oppose anything in the setback area. It's your only natural area left.
Talking about this, I think what I would be comfortable with is in the side setback, not to exceed 8 feet tall and no closer than 5 feet from the property line. In the rear yard, which I think is the more logical place you'll find playscapes, I think within the, not in the side setback, but in the rear, no closer than 10 feet to the property line, you can be at 15 feet tall. But only for playscape. That is what I will say, coming back to Jerry wanting to distinguish. I mean, there is an argument to be made that, a playscape inherently is going to be taller, and we don't want the allowed height of a playscape to allow somebody to put a 15-foot greenhouse or storage shed up.
We could do something like what we're doing with the tenting, and that is the further away you get from the property line, the taller you're allowed to go. With a cap.
Yeah,
I mean, that
except
gets
that I don't even
complicated
know if
for a
we want
second.
a storage shed that, even if it's in the buildable
You can
area.
max everything out at 15 feet, but start at 10.
Yeah, I don't even know if you want a 10-foot storage shed, but I don't know if those really exist very often.
Well, here we've grouped these things together. So we're calling them a common kind of thing. And we're going to give them some positioning allowance, and we're going to allow them to be a certain height. Without regard, I think, to what it is. Unless we start getting very specific about, well, but this thing is allowed to be this high, and this thing is allowed to be this tall, and this thing is allowed to be this tall. I'm not sure, do we want to get into that kind of specificity? I don't know.
I would like not to, but I'm seeing the challenges with not, I guess.
Uh-huh. Well, okay, without getting into height, I still want to drag this back to how far away from, okay, if it's height, if it has to do with the height of the object being a certain distance away from the rear lot line, then we probably do need to talk about how high each of these things is first. Otherwise, we just establish what the distance, the minimum distance is from the rear lot line straight up front for all of it. Doesn't make any difference what it is. I think 5 feet is certainly a good start. I'm up for 10 myself, but
Do we know how far, the one that was in question, Nikki, do you know if that was in the side or the rear, and how close it was to the fence?
No. We do not know exactly like where it is fully placed on the lot as far as from the back or the side lot lines, just because it didn't go through permitting.
It looks pretty close, though,
Yeah.
when you
And
drive by.
I know it's in
I guess that would be the rear for
rear-
them. Yeah, that's the
the
rear.
rear area of.
yeah. It looks like it's in the side yard, but
Well,
it's on the
the
rear
side
side,
yard
I
is
think,
Wallace.
their
yard.
side is on Wallace.
Yeah, it's the rear side, part of the side yard. And it looks to be about 5 feet away from the fence.
You know.
And it looks to be
Yeah.
pretty tall, too.
And it is pretty tall, that's right.
And it doesn't bother me, but, you know, there could be
Like,
another one that might.
well, one of the reasons it doesn't bother people is because it's actually attractive. So, I mean, if they had built an ugly one, people would be objecting a lot more.
Yeah, I don't know. It's character too.
Okay, so can we get at least what the minimum distance to the rear would be? We're saying that it's allowable in the rear?
7.5 feet.
Get the micrometer
7.5
out.
feet.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, I guess for me, part of it is not just the distance from the side yard and the height, but also the area, you know, because if you're building a 250 feet is a lot.
Yeah.
Square feet. I mean, I don't want that within 10 feet of my property
I think
line.
we ought to say that.
So, I mean, I would think that if most playhouses are, I don't know, what, 10 by 10 maybe? So
Yeah,
100 square
probably.
feet, something like that.
But and that's, yeah, it's footprint. I mean, the way the
Because that makes
current
it-
definition is written, it's a building, so you're thinking about 500, you know, conditioned square feet. I mean, it's,
But I mean, a lot of it is, well, I don't know.
yeah, I mean, maybe it's a footprint no larger, you know, any of these things,
We can-
footprint no larger than, is 10 by 10 enough for a reasonable?
Well, I
size?
think you've got to get in square footage because you might have not a square, right?
Well, it can fit in a square of, I mean, what's the square footage of a playscape? I mean, it's open. So, I mean, you're talking about what's the footprint.
The footprint
I think,
is, yeah. Yeah.
So what is the square footage of the footprint you can use, I think would be the way to do it.
Well, I thought we were excluding playscapes from a lot of this because they're open. I thought that was part of what Jerry was recommending.
Well, it's listed in this list, in the
Yeah.
first bullet point that we talked
It
about.
is in there, place set.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
just brought that to your attention and understanding that it's a different animal than
It is,
A
it really
building.
is a different animal.
If I may.
Yeah.
Okay, so most of this was brought before you because of a playhouse, okay? When we take that playhouse, we then go to the definitions, and we're looking at this definition holistically of accessory building or structure. The definition includes the playhouse. When we say structures, we were also getting confused because of this definition, because of the AC units and the pool pads or the pool equipment and such. To me, I think with structures, we've handled that with item 4.
Okay.
And now we're looking at these accessory buildings or structures, but the dangling is still the playhouse. So if we, from the definition, does that definition give us where we're wanting to stay and go?
Which is
knowing-
back to what Jerry said.
Right. Knowing that structures were just taken care of, or the structures that have been questionable or concerned with reviewers and new construction was just taken care of in item 4. Just a
Just
thought.
leave the status quo on the rest because it hadn't been a problem.
Just a thought. I know the structures thing is what I had brought up to the chair. And then now we're tasked with the playhouse, but the playhouse falls into this whole definition. So I think if we take the bite at item 4 and what the problem is with item 5,
Well, maybe Jerry's right.
unless
Maybe we should,
you are wanting to go forward, but in my perspective of just what
Yeah, we
we're
could
looking
wait
at,
for one of
what
those to
we're-
create a problem and fix that.
right, and so just what we've had that's come before us, what our concerns are, what people have been questioning are just what I have brought ahead. So,
Okay. It would, take it in a nibble fashion like that, it does make it easier to come up with the constraints. And if I hear you right, you're suggesting that we don't even touch the rest of it.
from what in my perspective, correct.
Yeah.
I think to make things, I don't necessarily want to say I want to make things easier, but I think right now we know what the known problems
Right.
are, and if we remove those those problems, are we where we want to be?
I guess, looking at this list of things, the one thing that stands out to me is the tool shed.
Okay.
In that, people move into a house and, they need to put their lawnmower someplace and they do need to do a few things. And without even thinking, they go down to, Home Depot and buy themselves a 10 by 10 foot shed. That's it. Yeah, put it over there.
So if that's a concern,
Yeah.
what if we strike tool house from the definition and you put in a new definition of what a tool house is, saying a tool house is X amount of square feet. So if it's larger than 200 square feet, it's not a tool house anymore. It's a tool shed. So a tool shed now is permittable. So therefore it's going to require those items.
Okay.
So I think the more you define certain things and having definitions galore is
Yeah.
not a bad thing.
Oh, I'm cool with it.
So
I agree.
I think as you define these certain things, and then if you want to remove children's playhouses, remove that.
Okay.
Come up with a definition of what a children's playhouse is. Of example, this. I know Miss Amanda's got the Planner's Dictionary, and there's plenty of things.
Okay.
So just so that maybe we can find what our problems are and try not to kind of keep creating more or trying to figure out something that may not necessarily really be a problem at this
Okay.
point.
That's fine.
so could we focus on playhouses and
Play sets, do.
play sets only? Like, which is what Jerry suggested.
Yeah.
But I was also gonna say, and include tool sheds, no, but,
Okay. What?
Well, what you buy at Home Depot
Yeah.
is more like the playscape than something you build, with
Right.
2x4s and stuff.
Yeah,
I
right,
got one of those prefabricated things, so a definition of that tool house, it can go into here.
Maybe we should just be focused on footprint in either situation. Generally if somebody's gonna go pay somebody to build one, it's probably gonna be reasonably
Well,
attractive.
that's just one factor.
Yeah. Well,
But size and height, see, if we're gonna focus on playscape, play set, to me, I don't really care where they build it or buy it. How tall is it? How big is the footprint?
why don't we take that, try it on, make a recommendation around that, circle back, maybe look at something else. How do we do that? Can we do that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start with what is called a play set, or are we talking about playhouses?
I was talking about considering them as one.
Would you?
I would.
Okay,
wouldn't.
I don't know.
Why not?
Well, you gotta look at them. If you saw the pictures, if, you know, you wanna, you would see that they're completely different on the way you put them together.
I don't care how you put them together. I care
Well,
what
I
it
do
looks like at the end.
because one's like a trampoline, for example, that even though it's big, say a small one, that you can get 3 people move. And a custom-built playhouse with concrete footings, you're not gonna move. So that's why I'd say one's a real more permanent structure versus one that's just put together with little pieces that you could take apart.
So you're saying, but I mean, it's still, where is that? I mean,
Well,
generally, if you're putting one together, it's going to be there for a while.
Well,
It can
that's-
be moved, but I don't really care
No,
if it can
well,
be moved.
it does. I got one up the hill that moves around when they're doing construction. But to me, the playscape is a portable item, you might say, and the playhouse is not portable. And so
So are you okay with? Do you want those to
Playscape-
be different heights and different placement
I
allowances?
yeah, the playscapes, the tallest I could find was 11 foot tall, and open stuff around it. It wasn't impeding water or drainage. And
Okay, so you're worried about that.
Yeah, there was. Whereas the other one, another thing besides square footage, is that when you get the rain, you got half of the vertical area is contributing to the rainwater drainage, and it's going concentrated straight down. So that's that part. So the playhouse is a little bit different. And if you want to get specific, so if we want to concentrate and say we want to take the playhouse out of the definitions and come back and study it, define it, we can hopefully do that.
Well, if we think about the one example that we started off with, it's more complicated because the way that it is structured, it goes up, and I believe it actually has a sliding board that comes off of it. So now, is it a playhouse or is it a play set?
Well, it depends on how it's constructed. If they use
Yeah.
4x4s and wood and bolted it all together, it's in solid side. It's a playhouse.
And
But-
so, what distinction are you trying to make there? What do you want different about that versus a place set?
Yeah.
Well,
What do you want different?
the difference is
Height, placement.
well, everything about the playscape that I found on Home Depot that you buy and assemble together is just these little components, lightweight, screws and bolts. And-
Well, I understand the distinction on how they're
Yeah,
assembled,
yeah,
but
yeah,
what?
but as for where somebody goes and puts it in the yard, I don't think it's gonna have a problem being in the setback area. Where
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get at. So you're
Right.
saying if it's a play set that's
Place-
purchased, it can
right.
be in the
Yeah.
setback. If it's constructed, it can't. That's the distinction you're making.
Well, to me, the
One of the
distinction is one
distinctions.
has enclosed space and one doesn't.
Well, it may not. I could go build one, an open air one. but
Well, I guess
I don't
I-
like the offerings from the
Yeah,
store. And
No, but I mean, a playhouse is,
Okay, well,
has
that's even a third distinction.
Yeah, yeah.
has
wood and stuff and
has a roof, has a roof and it
Walls
has
and
some enclosed space.
concrete footings.
These ones you buy, the one we used to have was enclosed and had a roof. And I
Yeah,
bought it- I
if you
bought
look
it
at,
the store.
if you look at the playground equipment that is down here, I know it's professional scale and all that stuff. Some of that stuff has a little cabin on the top of it.
Yeah.
There's
Oh, well,
a
that-
thing, you get in there,
Yeah,
and that's where I'm having trouble, is if we make definitions.
no, that's commercial and not residential.
In this place,
Well,
commercial
the
probably
most
counts.
popular.
Yeah.
Well,
place to buy
that's
stuff.
that's a good point, and I didn't think of that because I just heard the guy
Yeah.
went to Home Depot.
If I can interject, so the American Planning Association, they have a planner's dictionary, and so they have playhouse defined. Their definition for a playhouse actually combines a playscape and a playhouse as one, and it's a freestanding structure exclusively for the use of children, with a maximum height of 12 feet and an area not to exceed 120 square feet.
I love that.
Yeah,
I think that is just perfect.
Well, I wouldn't I wouldn't say perfect. You'd have, I would define it by, pictures if you have to, and the weight. I couldn't find the weight. The Playscape's only a couple 100 pounds, for example. Okay?
So what do you care about the weight?
combine.
Why do you care?
Because
Yeah, I
that
don't
defines how
understand.
portable it is.
Well, you could always take it
Yeah.
apart, right?
Yeah,
So then
Well,
the
I
weight
mean,
wouldn't matter.
yeah.
But it takes some work to take down a playhouse that's, built with 4x4 and concrete footings and solid and stuff. And so to me, there's a big distinction.
But if we're placing it if it's a height and the size and the
Yeah.
placement that we're okay with, why do we care if it can be taken apart or not? If we say it can't be bigger than this,
Well,
can't be taller than that, it
it-
can't be located here, then
it's
why do we
like
care if it can be torn
Readily
apart?
access to easements.
Well, yeah, that's
Yeah,
how, we
portable.
should take that into account when we decide where it can go, which is, to me, a separate thing from how it's built.
Well-
Amanda, would you mind reading it again?
Yeah,
Sure. It is a freestanding structure exclusively for the use of children with a maximum height of 12 feet and an area not to exceed 120 square feet.
$120 square feet?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
are,
Well, with that kind of,
are those definitions
Yeah, like-
available to the public?
I believe you have to pay for the dictionary.
Oh, you have to pay for it, okay.
Yeah. But I have it. So if you need a defined term, I'm more than happy to provide.
Would you cut and paste that and send it to, you can get it, that's cool, all right? Is there a definition of a playhouse in there?
That is the definition for playhouse. I
Okay.
think they combine playscape and playhouse as one.
there's this,
Okay,
And Jerry, if you wanna look, the most
All right.
popular place people get these things is Rainbow Play Systems,
all right.
as opposed to Home Depot.
I like that definition.
That's where
I
we
think
bought
that-
ours from, because everybody recommended we buy it from them.
Okay.
Rainbow.
And they have gigantic ones and ones you're more accustomed to, which complicates it a little bit.
Well, can we start with that definition and say, okay, assuming that that's our definition of what this is, now we can talk about the placement of it. Now, something that size is not gonna go into a side yard regardless,
right.
or at least a required side yard. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
You know what I'm picturing, it's a hard distinction. Yes, I would not want one in the side yard. If you built, or well, I don't know, I mean, is it the 15 foot or is it the 10 foot?
Well, in a required
but-
side yard.
Which is 15 or 10. I mean,
Yeah, right.
I would be more comfortable with something in the 15 than the 10, which we can, which is why on the other one we said no closer than 10 feet. But, if it were literally on the side of a house, I don't love that idea, but you can regulate that by side. But if it is behind the house,
Yeah,
I would be okay with it encroaching into the side setback by
Okay.
some amount, if you follow me.
yes,
So I don't
do.
want the whole thing on
Yeah.
the side of the house, but if
Yeah.
it's in the backyard,
Yeah.
what we would call
I-
colloquially the backyard.
I think that the side yard, if I recall this right, I think that the required side yard ends with the back of the structure, the main structure. And that from that point on, that it's all backyard.
Required is setback line, not the building.
I'm sorry? From the building, yeah, the building defines what the side and the rear yards are,
Okay,
okay?
right,
And
yard.
that the side yard ends at the rearmost point of the building. And then from there on in, it is rear yard, backyard.
Or how about, yeah,
That's
if,
not correct.
I don't know.
That is not correct,
That is not correct.
okay? Then
Well, here's
correct me,
the way I
please.
think
Correct me, please.
The side yard is a yard which is located between the main building on the lot line and the sidelines of the lot and extends across the side of the lot between the front yard and the rear yard. I take that back.
No, yeah, that is
Yeah,
what
I
he's
take
saying,
it
yeah.
back.
It does work.
I get it too quickly.
We're
Yeah.
cool.
I take it back.
Okay, we're cool.
Yeah.
So,
So,
what you
yeah.
just said is okay, because you're not anywhere,
Has to
you're
be in the
not in the
rear
side
yard.
yard anymore, you're in the
Yeah,
rear
it's
yard,
rear
okay?
yard, yeah.
All right? And if we said, okay, let's give it, say, a 5-foot constraint
10, whatever.
in the
the
rear,
number, yeah.
that could be, have 3 sides to it, right? Good, right? So, we good with that? Is 5 feet the right number?
No.
Well, you don't like it, I know that.
Well,
What's the right number? What you said earlier is not in the required yard at all.
What?
That's what I've heard, okay?
What I had in mind are the playscapes that you could find at Home Depot that are open to the air, lightweight, components around that you could easily take apart. Okay, so maybe the Rainbow has different structures that I haven't looked at yet. But if we're gonna, get into this, if you wanna get a little, what I would be willing to do is it would be an encroachment into the setback area, provided there's a trade-off for that area and for another open area in the buildable area. Okay, so you may not wanna go there, that's
I don't know
okay,
how we do that.
but then I'm
Yeah.
not gonna go into
Yeah,
the setback.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think-
think
I
we
think
should
the
be
whole
requiring.
Part of this is
Well,
trying
you're
to
the wrong
simplify
person.
the playscape
Well-
situation.
different
I think
Yeah.
that's
Well, it's
part of
simple
it.
to say,
Yeah, to
stay
me,
out.
I agree with Tony.
Yeah.
To me, if there's a limitation of 120 square feet, I don't care. And
Exactly.
12 feet
I mean,
high.
let's use
Yeah.
common sense here.
Yeah,
Like,
I
these
don't-
are
Given-
little
Yeah.
structures. Who cares where you put it on your lot? Let
Right.
people have freedom to do it. Hasn't been an issue. Why do we need to overregulate it? If you want to put some conditions on certain things to, kind of look ahead, that's fine. But like micromanaging where you put something, and I think that's just not what we need as a community. And I don't think that's helpful to get things passed quickly and get to the real what we're trying to do. But that's
Well,
kind of my
I
take. I think there's
respectfully disagree.
over-regulating.
I don't,
Yeah,
we,
yeah, I think.
I think the more regulations and the more if this, then this, if this, then this, if this, then this,
right,
that's where you require permitting.
Right.
So if you're gonna say straight up definition, okay, if it's less than that, okay, it's not gonna require anything.
Right.
Right.
But if we see that something is larger than X amount of square feet, obviously somebody brings it up going, what is this?
Right.
Then we look deeper into it, then that's when you start defining things. But as Mike was saying, it's like, how
Yeah, so if it's
how
of
would
a
you
certain
like to
size
use
and
your
height,
lot?
we're okay. If it's
Yeah.
different than that, then they can build it, but they gotta come get a permit for it, which is gonna govern
That-
where they can build it.
That's fair.
So
That's fair.
it's
And
Or,
Yeah.
or if they want it to be,
Well,
they could go to,
Well, we've
Like-
defined,
BOA.
if we have a definition that is what Amanda had described, we have that definition, what a playset is, and it exceeds that, it's no longer a playset, it's something else. It's really what I think I just heard. It's something else. It's
Right.
beyond that. Playset plus, it's something that needs more
Yeah.
scrutiny.
And Jerry, at first I was thinking what you're thinking in terms of play sets. But then when Tony mentioned the fact that a lot of play sets do have a roof on them and they are a little bit more complicated in terms of their structure than what we used to have as swing sets. I think that the joint definition that Amanda read is great because it really gives you the freedom as a homeowner to build whatever you want as long as it complies for your children with these guidelines, within these guidelines. I think it's great that we combine playhouse and playscape into one definition. And I love the 12 foot, and I love the 120 square feet for the surface, as I don't think 120 square feet is going to make that much of a difference in terms of runoff water or impervious cover or whatever, and I also don't think that many neighbors would object to that either.
And Amanda, was that
Huh?
was that 120 square foot footprint?
Was that a motion?
It was square.
Sure, that's a motion.
Yeah.
Change it.
Yeah. It could be 10 by 12, it can be 8 by 15.
I just think square
It
footage
could
of
be-
its footprint,
Yeah.
no bigger than 120. I don't know that
Right.
you want to talk about what is the square foot. I mean, you measure
It's
a
the
little house on
footprint.
the top.
Footprint.
I mean,
Well,
you know,
I always,
footprint.
me-
Yeah.
112,
It just says
I always
square
measure it
feet.
from the,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
from,
I think a footprint no larger than 120 square feet.
Okay,
yeah.
right. Let's assume that that's the definition. Let's just assume that, okay? And then going forward, okay, now we're allowing it in the required backyard.
Yes.
We're allowing it. Are we gonna put constraints on where it can be within the required backyard?
Well, 5 feet.
You don't want
I
it
thought we were
against,
talking
I
about 5
think you,
feet.
you don't want it against the, are you okay with it not being against the fence, Michael?
Honestly, I don't care where you put it, as long
Okay.
as long as it makes sense. If you have a swing set, you're obviously not going to place it against a fence, but maybe one end of it you might want to place against a fence. That's kind of why I err on the side of letting people do what makes sense. But there is the possibility somebody would put it somewhere a neighbor didn't like it. So if you kind of want to try to regulate that, then saying space at 5 feet or something,
Yeah, a little
you know,
margin,
gives
yeah.
a cushion. But you know, like, you know, if a place, you know, has more of a rectangle footprint and you want to put one end of it close to the fence, I have no problem with it.
And probably nobody will complain. I mean, most
Right.
of them have some sort
Yeah,
of, you know, building up to the center. So if somebody puts it there, probably not even going to know.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, common sense is kind of what I'm trying to say.
But at
and,
least
like,
if we have a restriction of
and-
5 feet, if somebody is going to build their own
Right.
that falls within that definition, that's permanent, we're at least going to know it's not any closer than whatever. So I think it's reason. You know, I generally agree. I don't really think it matters. But I think we should have a reasonable restriction of some kind.
Then let's make what that reasonable is.
5 feet.
Make it 5 feet. I'm
You
good
know,
with
they're
it.
not
I'm good with
permitted, so
5.
they
Okay, all
could
right,
probably do
okay,
it
let's
closer,
capture it at
nobody's
that,
gonna
let's call it
know.
5. You know, we're not motioning this stuff, but we're trying
And
to
so
come to
that's
consensus.
basically it would be required to be in the rear yard, is what we're saying, right? It
That's
can't be in
right.
the side yard. Can't be in the front yard.
That's right.
It's
I
in
would
the-
let them in the side yard though. That's my thing. I have no reason to say no. Like, what if you?
But not the
have-
required side yard, I guess I'd say.
I
There's
really
not
don't
enough
care because
space.
you're talking about kids play stuff. I mean,
I
what
just
is it
don't think
hurting?
anybody's gonna put it there in the require. I mean,
Well, here,
Why
think
not?
about
If you've got a
this.
fence too,
Okay.
and you want to have a little side courtyard and put your kids' stuff
Yeah.
out there, why wouldn't you?
Here, you
Like,
know,
I don't get
looking
why
at a
you
corner,
even-
looking at a corner lot like what I have, my required side yard is 30 feet. And then I have right of way that goes the additional 10 feet. From the edge of I have required side yard all the way to the curb. But it's 40 feet of nothing I'm allowed to do with. I'm not allowed to put a PlayStation out there.
Well,
If that's to make the front of your building uniform across the street that it faces.
Yeah. Well, I understand why it's there, but I don't know why I wouldn't be allowed to
Can't
put a
build with
PlayStation
something.
there.
well, if you wanted to have it in the side yard, my
The people
perspective
that
would
live
be,
next
let's
to you
do
don't
what we
want
did
to
in
replace
4,
that.
yeah, no closer than
10 feet, and have it.
That's a good point there. I mean,
I don't know.
And have it screened.
I guess,
for public view.
okay, what, if,
Dave's is a good point. I mean, maybe the other way you do it is if it's in a side yard, it can be no closer than
10
10
feet, let's make it a 10-foot rule.
Okay,
We'll just use the 10-foot rule
for the side yard.
for a side
side
yard.
And publicly screened. For
I
the
don't-
side yard, but
Yeah.
I mean, to
well,
me,
if it's 12 feet tall, you can't publicly.
Well, you can put a fence, you're allowed,
or a
you know.
bush. It
Well,
says
but in
vegetation.
your scenario, if you had little kids or your grandkids, you put a playscape there. How are you going to screen that from public view? You'd have to build a tower around it.
For
Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
No.
No, you're not.
No, well, and really, if you're gonna have a playscape and kids, you're
Bunch of
gonna want it
cypress
fenced in anyway, so I guess it's just a matter of.
And then if you're looking at his house and he had a slope towards Rolling Wood, it would be even more complicated. You have to have 20 foot, you know.
All
Yeah, I
right,
know
let's
in-
say 10 feet on the side yard. Let's say 10.
10 feet on the side yard, that's not, we don't have to try to hide it.
I
would
just
agree
wanna
with
be
that.
be clarified that I have no objection to swing sets anywhere.
Okay.
It's complicated because most of these
Okay.
playhouses we're talking about have a swing set as
So,
well.
okay. So,
Right.
5 yard,
Right,
part of it,
It gets complicated. That's why it's hard to hash out in one little time.
Well,
is
can
this
we
stuff
make a
being
mo-
captured?
Can we move forward? Can I make a motion? All right, I move, is that all right? I move that we use the definition of the Planning Council of
Dictionary.
America,
Amanda,
that we define playscape and playhouse together as a freestanding structure with a maximum height of 12 feet and 120 square foot footprint, and that we recommend that that be placed either in the backyard 5 feet from the property line, or in the side yard 10 feet from the property line.
that sounds like a good motion.
I'll second it.
All right. We have a motion, we have a second. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
No.
Okay, it carries
And that's-
3-2.
What do you- Oh, you're voting for
Oh,
it?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I like it. Okay. We do not have anything more to do with it. We've decided that we're only gonna handle that one item, then we are finished with this for the time being. We could,
get some guidance from council.
we will ask for council to provide us any additional guidance if they would like us to rule or recommend anything else. Is that fair? Do we need a motion on that? I don't think. We got that?
You can discuss.
Would you?
Go ahead and just make a motion on your direction and what you like.
All right, all right. I'm gonna make a motion that what we have just motioned on is gonna go to city council. We're gonna leave it at that, but request additional guidance from council if there is more that needs to be done in this area.
I second that.
All right? Okay, we've got a motion, we've got a second. Any additional discussion around it? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed? Nice carry.
And I would like to thank Jerry for his work.
Yes,
And-
Yes.
thank you.
And your initial recommendation was correct to look at playscape separately.
Okay,
Well,
all right.
thank you.
I'm happy to say that these next items are gonna go pretty quickly, I think. Let me get back to where I was. Discussion and possible action on clarification. This is item number 6, regarding CRC side yard projection recommendation. This has been being carried for the past 3 months. We've not been able to get to it. I did go back to the CRCRC. This is about the chimney. That's how old this is. This is about allowing the chimney in the side yard. We just went past that in our,
That was in number 3, right?
Yes.
So
that's
basically,
right.
this
So,
one's moot now.
This is moot.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. We already covered this. So, but it's been on the agenda for months. We just haven't been able to get to it because of other things, okay? So, I'm gonna close out agenda item number 6, move along to agenda item number 7, discussion and next steps regarding consultant review and assessment of proposed segmenting and parallel plane height measurement approaches. All right, I had hoped that Mike Rhodes would be here. He's not. Last P and Z meeting, we reviewed what the next steps would be for doing this comparison of parallel surfacing or plane versus a segmenting approach that is used by the city of Austin, along with tenting. And we would we would look at several different lots and apply these two different techniques to those and see whether or not they work. I have the, the survey file, digital survey file from Duke Garwood's place that I sent to Alder Studio Architects with the go-forward plan that we approved last P and Z meeting. Mike knows about this all along the way, okay? We've had at least text discussion on it. I met with them yesterday for clarity, and they understand what it is we're trying to get from them, and said they can do it. All right? And they will come back in the next day or two with an estimate as what it's gonna cost. And then I plan to ask city council at the next city council meeting on the 17th for an appropriation that will cover that,
Oh, great.
okay?
So you gave them the file just so they could look and say, okay,
They have a
I get
file,
it.
yeah. Now, we need
More.
the digital files from the other three.
I don't know if mine wound up being one of them. I've got a digital file for
If
at
you have the
least
digital
one-
file, we need it.
one or two.
I don't
know.
have it. We don't have the digital file for you, and I don't know, we have Mike's digital file, but that was gonna be an accessory. That was only if nothing else worked. And then there's
Pretty
another
sure I've
couple
got
of,
one.
there's another couple of lots in there. But if you have your digital file, I'd love to be able to get it from you. That was my assignment to Mike, is get the rest of the digital files. All we have are PDFs. And,
Can
Nikki,
you send me the addresses, just because I'd like to know?
you'd like to know, okay, you
Yeah.
bet, I can do that.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
It doesn't need to go like, whatever, I mean, unless you wanna list them and whatever, but I
Yeah.
would just like to know.
Well, they should, no, I guess within these documents, I guess they are not written, yeah.
Okay.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, I
No
appreciate
problem.
it, yeah.
No problem. They're all, half of the people here and stuff, I mean, it's not gonna be an issue.
You know, I know you have some connection to Alter Studio.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see what they say in terms of price. The only question I have there, they're maybe my favorite, in my top 2 favorite architects in town, but they're also probably in the top 2 most expensive architects. Did they give you
Yeah.
any sense for like,
He,
are we going to too much horsepower for something like this?
well, they're kind of already, and they've already got skin in it now.
Yeah. I guess we'd have to see if they come
The
back with
fact-
some
The
absurd
fact is, one of the
price, yeah.
partners in Alder Studios, all hands on the table, is my son-in-law.
Mm.
Okay, and he's not doing it necessarily as a favor to me. He's doing it as a favor to the city of Rollingwood. And I said, and he said, we could do this pro bono. I said, no, don't. Charge us something. So they're going to come up with a number. It's going to take him, I think, a day and a half to do it. And then I asked them to have their guy come to this meeting to talk about it and answer any questions that we have about the differences between and how they were to work through or any of that. And they agreed that would be fine. They can do that.
I had one question. This was all great, and I thought your letter to them was really great. But I did have one question. The letter talks about 4 properties. What we had before was 5 properties, and we kind of defined those. Was one of these dropped? We had a 5, a slope upward, downwards.
There were 4 properties, Tony, plus Mike's.
Okay.
And Mike was, the way he gave them to me was, these are the properties, 4 properties that we want to do. And if we need to do another one, you can have mine. That
And
was-
so do you know which of these 5, kind of categories we defined we have? Like we had slope upward, slope downward, side to side, diagonal, no slope.
Not in front of me, no, I
Okay.
don't have that. Mike had some description.
I was just gonna say, because I might,
Yeah,
if we're missing
and
one,
it's
I
in
might,
a-
yeah.
It's in an email I have somewhere. I'd rather not.
Well,
I
if you
can
don't
send-
mind, maybe
If you
we-
would like,
yeah.
I can send you the email. If
Yeah,
you
that
want.
would be great, because I was
Yeah.
gonna say, if we're missing one that we would like to have, I could try to find somebody who has one like that.
All I know is what Mike gave me, right?
Okay.
So, he seemed happy. I don't know.
Okay.
He's been difficult to talk with.
Yeah.
Okay,
He's
so-
got some things going on.
And I'm not slowing down. You know, we're gonna get this done, you know, so,
I was just saying, yeah, if we're missing any of these, we might be able to.
we had
Fine one.
it was a really great discussion we had at Alder Studios yesterday about how we would do the parallel surface. Because I didn't know how you do it, and, they have a way. We figured it out right on the spot. This is what we'll do. They like the parallel surface approach. They prefer that, frankly, over anything else. They've never done it with tenting,
Yeah,
and
that's
that
the
makes it
complication.
more complicated, but they can do it. They're smart people. Okay, so, any other questions around this item? This is
I'd love
primarily
if you
just,
could share the addresses when you share them with
I will,
Nikki.
I
yeah.
will get them out to you, I'm sorry, that's not in this, okay? Is it even, I guess it's appropriate to put them in here, huh? I guess it's okay, if they've agreed to do it.
If they've agreed to do it.
They have agreed to do it. Everybody, has agreed to do this. Okay. Moving on to item number 8.
I
Is-
have a
Excuse me.
question.
Yes.
And I just, with respect to the slope characteristics, it talks about the direction of the slope, but it doesn't specify how much slope, how much change in elevation. So do we have, could we also identify for these representative properties what the change in elevation is across properties? So that we've covered a range of changes in elevation as well.
I guess maybe another way of asking, do we have one of the big sloped timberline lots that's kind of been in question?
I don't know what the result's gonna show.
I don't
But
either.
I would think what we would want is a relatively flat lot, a relatively steep lot, 10 feet or less of slope, that would be the relatively flat. One, somewhere in the middle between a very steep and a very flat, or 2 or 3 in the middle. The slope direction, to me, is not so much important as the slope. I think it is important front to back
yeah.
and side to side, but I also think we need a range of degree of slope
My,
in these representatives.
my first take on this, taking it to Mike, and then you guys saw my original recommendation on a go-forward plan, was to create an artificial lot with slope and then position things different ways, and it would be a fairly significant sloped lot. But Mike didn't like that. He thought that, no, we had to have reality. But actually getting
And I can elaborate on that.
people to approve the use of their digital files for this exercise is more difficult than actually drawing one up yourself, making one up. Tony?
Well, I was just going to say the thing that Mike brought up that
Yeah.
resonated to me as a builder, design professional, whatever you want to call him, is the natural slope and the fact that you're not only just saying the lot slopes generally this way, which you can certainly recreate. It's doing this,
Yeah.
too. So that's why I think he and then I agreed, let's take something real because that's what we're going to be working with. But I agree with your point too. I think what we should do is you're going to get feedback for how much Alter Studio would charge for this.
Yeah.
You're going to circulate the list of lots.
Yeah.
I think we should look at those, and obviously before we hire them, which y'all would have to approve anyway, is look at those and say, yeah, does this feel like a good representative group?
Fairly easy, I would think, if you have a digital file to determine what the change in elevation is.
Oh, yeah, it's
Oh,
easy to
even
do.
with the
Yeah,
PDF,
part-
it'll tell you
That
that,
part's
yeah.
easy to do.
And they might be able
And
to
ensure
take,
that we've got a range.
Yeah.
right,
Well,
and
that's
they-
yeah.
but with a digital file, they might be able to change the
Exactly.
Yeah, they
stuff
might, yeah.
And if
to,
there's-
to give us some different, scenarios.
If it's not a range of slopes, then do what Jeannie says
Yeah.
and ask them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Artificially.
We could say this one was a
Yeah.
10-foot slope. Can you just take that one and
Make it more.
make it 20
Yeah.
or whatever? Yeah.
Still keep it at 5 sets of,
Yeah.
5 sets of plans, but if there's, we've got 3 flat and 1 very steep, then have a 4th one that's in the middle.
Yeah.
that's digital.
I think Mike thought he had found these characteristics, but yeah, I don't know if we talked about
that's the-
degree
yeah,
of slope.
Since,
Yeah.
again, I haven't really spoken with Mike about these things, it's all just handed to me in an email and some texting and stuff, and I just had to take it that he was satisfied with these were representative of what it was we were trying to get to.
I have
But-
one other question,
Okay,
and that is, I'm looking at the steps to the tenting
Yeah.
exercise. The last item, 4D,
Steps to the tenting exercise.
I believe it is the, cap the resulting tent structure with parallel surface that is 35 feet directly above the natural grade. So that is parallel plane.
yeah.
Do we also have, can they apply the excavation exception that's in the parallel plane, that's in the CRC proposal?
We did not talk about that.
Well, I don't know if you need to do that because, you know, I mean, height, you know, that's creating false height by digging, right? And so that's not gonna change your top.
That's
It's gonna
right.
change your bottom. I don't know if we need that as much as just being sure we have the top, right?
That's kind of how I looked at it. You know, whenever we
Now, I
came
will
up with
say,
that,
one thing that you,
Yeah.
as you talked about that jumped out to me, was above natural grade, but isn't the definition in the code the lower of natural grade or
Finished grade.
finished grade?
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that need to be talked about with them?
I'm sorry.
The code language is parallel plane is an imaginary plane that is 35 feet above and parallel to the original native ground surface.
Yeah.
I thought I read somewhere from the lower, okay. Okay, then the definition of building height is the vertical distance from the original native ground surface or finished grade, whichever is lower.
Right.
Well, I thought if you're going to where you have 26 feet and you add 5 feet, you get to 35-foot height max. Is that what you're thinking? Or,
No, now I'm confused about the language in the code, actually. I just was saying in the instructions to the architect, it just says 35 feet above natural grade, and I just had in my memory this whichever is lower, so that's in the definition of building height. But then later it says the parallel plane is 35 feet above the original native ground surface. So I guess I'm not sure how the whichever is lower factors into that. Do you have it's on page 23?
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm looking at lines 41 through 43 and then 68 through 70.
40, okay, 41. Building height residential means a vertical distance from the original native ground surface or finished grade, whichever is lower, to the highest point directly above. So, if you're digging down, then you're still only allowed to go up 35 feet. Except for that,
If the finished
Well-
grade is lower,
yeah, yeah.
parallel plane, would be, the 35 feet is from the original native ground surface, not whichever's lower.
That's the way I read it too.
So what does that 41 through 43 apply to?
What is what, I'm sorry? Ask the question again, Tony.
Well, I guess, what's your limitation on height, is it 35 feet from the lower of native ground surface or finished grade, or is it 35 feet from original native ground surface in the parallel plane definition?
The question is, is the parallel plane, parallel to native original ground surface, or is it parallel to native original ground surface or finished grade, whichever?
I think the finished grade piece should not be in here, to tell you the truth. I think it should be always from the original native ground. Now, the way that this is written would have you think about it differently, but
I think my understanding is finished grade is in there where you cannot determine original native ground. You know, if there's been a prior excavation, then finished grade, and you buy the property after it's been excavated, then it's whichever's lower.
well, that could be, but I mean,
But that's a detail.
that'll work.
I'm just
That'll
saying
work.
what
Yeah,
my
yeah.
understanding, I'm not trying
yeah.
to say that's a CRC recommendation, but that may be something to be clarified.
Yes.
Yeah, I clarified. I think if you excavate 5 feet down, like in the front or something, that lower elevation is allowed to go up to 35 feet.
Well, no, there's a whole other section about excavation allowing you to go higher than 35 feet.
Yeah, that's right, and that's a gimme. That was
Yeah.
something we added in so that it would work on particularly highly sloped lots.
It's
Well,
a-
the only reason I
Yeah.
bring this up is
Yeah.
I would guess we need to make sure the architect's drawing the parallel plane. how
They're
it's supposed to
doing
be
it
drawn.
based on whatever contours we're giving them. They're not gonna do anything else with them. It starts with the contours we give them, which are hopefully, presumably, the original surveys from which the building plans were started, for the,
Which would be the finished grade.
well, it would be the original, it would be the
For the
original.
construction, for the
Yeah,
construction.
yeah. The notion is that you take your original survey and then you build 35 feet around that survey and create another surface that is identical to the one below it. And that becomes your constraint. You're not allowed to build, you're not allowed to penetrate that top surface. That's it.
Okay.
And they,
That was my understanding. I don't necessarily read this, or it's confusing, I guess I should say.
when,
I don't know what I read it as. I don't want it.
all-
Well, those will be questions for the architect.
well, no, actually, this is the kind of thing that sometimes I think that once it gets out of our hands, then it turns into code. I don't know where that part comes from, but
I thought the attorneys did write this code, but
we did.
no.
No, they did. The attorneys wrote this code.
Okay. I thought you were saying that this will get cleaned up when the code's written, but it's already been written, right?
I'm sorry, Tony, I can't hear you.
I thought you were just saying that this is the type of thing that will get cleaned up when the attorneys write the code, and I guess I was saying.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
No. I said that the attorneys put that language in there, and I'm not quite sure that I understand it either.
Well, maybe that's a conversation for another day.
I thought that was the language from the CRC.
I thought so too. Well, we'll have to figure that out at some point. And my question is, does it need to be figured out before we set the architect?
That's fine, yeah.
That's my question.
We'll see if they raise it.
We'll see if they
The
went.
architect raises it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because they have this language, right? The
Because
architect has the code language.
They have
Yeah,
everything that
yeah.
you have here.
Okay, so they have the draft ordinance?
Yeah, they have the draft. That's what they're working from. They're working
Okay.
actually from the draft ordinance. And they got that right away. They says, oh, yeah, you just want to step it up 1 foot, all that. And the question came up as to whether or not that they needed to actually draw a tent around that. And we kicked that around a bunch, and then it turns out that if you start at 25 feet at the wall, and you put a set of contours there, and then you go to 26 feet, and so on, all the way up to 35 feet, and you have successfully coming in contours, you are building the tent, but you're making it out of contours,
Right.
okay?
That's what I was always concerned about.
That's right, and that's how they'll do it.
Okay.
And they said, this won't take any time at all. They're gonna have more trouble doing the segmenting piece than they are with this. They said, oh, this is easy, we can do this, boom, bing, bing, bing. You know, the other part, trying to do it the way that the city of Austin says, that's a little harder. We gotta scrape these and do this and that, and it's just, and then getting the perspective such that you can look at it and say, well, that makes sense. What's the angle that we're gonna be looking at on each of these lots? So you can make the comparison, say, well, this works, or this works better, or it doesn't work as well, or whatever. So,
Well, that's what Alex said, that it was easy with the parallel plane. She said that.
Well, I think it's easy to draw the parallel plane. I think what we're trying to figure out is it easy to draw a house within the parallel plane? Yeah.
Well,
Well, they're not easy. Is it,
Well,
because it's sloping, do you wind up thinking, okay, yeah, we can do 25 feet here, and then you say, oh, well, with this sloping, maybe you can't, because it's twisting and turning a lot.
that's right.
That's what we're gonna,
And
that's
this
what
is
we wanna
gonna-
find out.
And this is gonna, yeah, this is gonna do that.
Right.
Yeah, you see, well, this is how bad it could get. And of course, that would change as you move the thing around on the lot, which we can't do that, but it would. You know,
Yeah, hopefully it will be a visual that you can picture, and maybe they'll
Yeah.
say, like the city of Austin one has the
Yeah.
tent, and then it shows a fake house in there.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, we're just gonna see what we get.
are you familiar with Frank Gehry?
Yes.
Okay, this is kind of how Frank Gehry would design. Using these sequential, smaller sets of contours as you go upward. Or at least that's how they told me.
I'm familiar with what his buildings look like. That's it.
Anyway, any more around this? I'm feeling pretty good. We're heading in the right direction. I think we are there. And we'll make sure that the lots that we have are representative of what they need to be. And that we can get the changes in elevation with that, or understand how the changes in elevation affect these things.
it will be useful to have representative.
It will.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
But I was impressed with how quickly they caught on to what it was we were trying to do. So I'm gonna move on, if I may, to agenda item number 8. Discussion and possible action and recommendation for fence construction materials. You know, it's almost 9:30. This is not an urgent item.
And I think Mike wanted to be here for that one too.
That's fair.
I mean, it's really his item, I think.
Item 9 could be quick.
Huh?
I think item 9 could be quick. You don't discuss
Okay.
around and around. This will be just more of a.
Yeah, item 9 is probably a fairly easy one. Thank you, Nikki. Discussion, we will move from discussion item number 8 to 9.
Table 8, yeah.
I'm sorry?
Table 8, I guess.
Oh, table 8, yes. Moving to discussion item number 9, discussion and possible action on an updated recommendation regarding code enforcement from Planning and Zoning Commission and CRCRC. And we had come up with, if you look at the bottom of this recommendation, there is, well, we have our recommended, review the current resources to ensure its staff is being provided what's needed to effectively enforce codes and ordinances, and if not, take corrective action. That was there before. Ensure, number 2, ensure that city contractor consultant performance meets requirements for effective and timely code enforcement, and if not, take correct. We didn't have that before. We added that as a recommendation from P&Z to put that into this set of recommendations. And then number 3 was set the penalties for ordinance violations to the maximum allowable and enforce them effectively. That was in there earlier whenever we did. So this group added item number 2. And I took this back, by the way, to the CRCRC, and I says, this is what P&Z asked us to do for them to take it forward. They were fine with that. That was fine. So we voted on it, and so this is the new version, essentially with P and Z updates into it. So it effectively becomes a joint CRCRC and P and Z recommendation, okay? I don't know if I need a motion on this. Help me out.
If you want action to move it forward, I would make a motion.
Okay, we want to move, if all agree, I'd like to motion that we move this forward to city council. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second, okay. We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Oh, okay. Ayes carry. Final item. Discussion and update regarding a recommendation for comprehensive drainage. We had forwarded CRCRC recommendations for drainage, impervious cover, and FAR, minus the recommendation at the base of that. It said that consider creating another group that would look specifically at drainage and impervious cover. This group didn't like that. And so we sent the recommendation without that piece to city council, and they have it. This piece, according to P and Z, you guys, you wanted to handle this in-house by P and Z. What to do with impervious cover and drainage. And I don't really know where to go with that, but that's where we ended up.
I forget, are we being asked to do that?
I know.
I think that what we had said is we're going to do it.
I think what it was, if we're jogging memory here,
All right,
I
thanks,
think
Nikki.
this was an update on it from, we took it to council. And I think council at that time was, when we had found out that Ashley was leaving.
Yeah.
And I think the mayor had said we didn't really want to start any groups.
That's
I think this was where you were gonna come back and kind of let P and Z know that that's where we stood on it. I think it was just kind of an update. I don't think we had any, like, momentum on anything.
Well,
But I could be wrong.
That,
but
that is
I
right.
think-
You know, that the mayor said, you know, please, let's not, you know, we're not positioned to be able to get into
Right.
that. But that does not take away from what we said that we would do internally here. If we go back probably 3 meetings, you check, you'll see that we said that we don't want to start another group. We want to handle this issue in-house.
Oh, now I remember. Now I know what you're
Okay.
talking about. Yeah,
So the
that's
recommendation was not to start another group.
Right.
Take that recommendation out of there, okay?
Yeah.
But how that happens, I don't know.
My recollection was if we were being charged with reviewing drainage and all this, then we should do it, not form a group. I don't remember, I may be wrong, I don't know that we said we're gonna start this now and do it.
Okay.
I don't know if, I mean, certainly we can if we all wanna do that. I don't know if we have any direction from anyone to do that. So, I don't know if it's a do we wanna do that? Or is someone asking us to do that?
I can get somebody to ask us to do that. If,
I'm kinda good with the drainage manual as we have it, but, you know, I'm, you
Well,
you tell
you
me
know,
we're tackling it, we're tackling
you know,
it.
there's been a lot of discussion around this issue about drainage. And part of that discussion is, yeah, we have this drainage criteria manual out there. It's been in service for about 5 or 6 years. No one knows whether it's working or not. And
Hopefully the people that engineered it.
well, no. Well, I mean, yeah, theoretically it's supposed to work, but if you take the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars that are being spent on collectively the lots to comply with the drainage criteria manual, are we getting, is that money getting the bang for its buck that it should be getting? Or possibly should it be considered that we collect a certain amount of money from each lot as it's being built and use that to fund a more comprehensive drainage plan that doesn't take the individual lots into consideration, but to all the lots into consideration?
We used to have
That's the
something like
question.
that where if a lot sloped a certain way and you could catch it, you could pay into a fund in lieu of doing that.
Exactly.
I remember Gavin talking about that a few years ago.
That's,
I don't think it ever got any traction.
well, I know, Tom Farrell's all about it. And I don't disagree with the notion. When I see all these little postage stamp drainage plans being done, I have to wonder, okay, well, that looks pretty good for that 15,000 square feet, but how does that work against the one that's right next to it? There was no consideration, and for that matter, nothing new has been built on that place, so it's perceived that, your universe is bounded by your lot line. But the universe is, and what water does, goes way beyond the lot line. I think really that it's possible that we went in the wrong direction on that, but
Well,
someone
I
needs to
think
look
when
at
it was written, my understanding was we didn't have enough money to do something comprehensively. And if you're only getting new money when something's being built, and if you don't have a larger drainage plan or fund, you have to do something when that's being built and increasing impervious coverage, et cetera. And I thought the charge with the drainage manual was to get engineers to help us say that, okay, if you build this, you're not creating any additional runoff from what was there already.
Okay.
And
Alright.
so if it's working,
Yeah.
then it's not adding to any runoff elsewhere, and you
Okay.
can handle it one by one.
Okay.
I guess if an engineer tells us that what's being designed in the drainage manual is not working in the way that it was designed to, then that's kind of another
Well, it's a
issue.
little
And then the other question is,
Yeah.
could we, if we could go get all that money back and put it into a fund and
Yeah,
do something more global? I agree. Maybe the answer is yes, but how do you? It's chicken and the egg.
yeah, that's right. Well, it's a little bigger than the first thing that you said, because whenever the drainage criteria manual was designed, it was not considering so much subterranean drainage control features, okay? And we had Catherine Horn here, a couple of months ago, and she's talking about this hole that's been dug in the backside yard there that is now a collection vessel it was going to be a collection vessel for drainage. And it sounds like a great idea until it silts over and it doesn't collect the water anymore, and nobody knows it because it's underground. Who's down there checking it out to make sure that the thing is actually functional? So even if the design is correct, the designs, as we get further into it and the designs get more complicated, they need a certain amount of care and feeding. And is that care or for that matter, enforcement? And is that enforcement happening? And if it did, how would that happen? How does anybody go around and check to make sure that all these subterranean drainage features are working? So that.
Well,
There is
yeah, and
that.
I don't know how those work, but
I don't-
I guess I would like to think that they have some sort of system in them that tells you what's happening with them.
That's not a requirement. It's not and maybe that's it. And maybe that's what this group of people who was looking at it said, well, the drainage manual doesn't have that in there. Maybe that needs to be in there. I don't know.
Well, maybe a step one is we have engineers that review that who I think were part of writing it as well. Maybe we should get a report from
Tony,
the experts telling us what we've got and
Yeah.
where it may have
to me, what's happened is that, we've had a DCM, and then we've had our civil engineering firms look at what the drainage issues are around Rollingwood, and made recommendations for something like $11 million worth of drainage structures that would help control or manage. our drainage so that our problems might go away. Well, no one had any appetite for $11 million worth of anything. But, and so that recommendation goes on the shelf and nobody looks at it again. And you say, well, did anybody look at it really hard and say, well, let's prioritize some of these things. Maybe there's a couple of things here we could do for $1 million that would take care of 80% of it, maybe. I don't think anybody has actually done any of that. They've kind of just,
The report itself did prioritize each project.
okay,
And these are different projects than what we're doing right now.
No, two
They're-
of the projects were in that report. And so, the Hubbard, Pickwick project and the Nixon Pleasant Cove project were in that, and they were high priorities in that report. And so, that report, I think it's a good report. It hasn't been updated. The drainage model that was used was pre-Atlas 14, so it hasn't been updated for the Atlas 14 drainage. But the biggest project in there is the flooding across Edge Grove. So if you, at the entrance, so that's a major part of that report. And we can possibly get money from other sources, including TxDOT, when they decide they want to expand Case Road. But I think the difficulty we have in Rollingwood is we have all these natural drainage channels. And sometimes they in somebody's backyard, sometimes they're in somebody's front yard. And that's where our water goes. What our current drainage manual attempts to control is that when you build a new house and you increase the square footage, that you don't increase the rate of discharge, so that you're not flooding these yards and backyards where the water goes today, and streets. And what, at the council level, we are engaged in talking about, do we need to have our engineers tell us how they do, in the permitting process, how they do that permitting, when they allow additional flows into streets or into natural drainage channels. And we've had some instances where the drainage retention facility is put in a natural channel, and we need to know what accommodation is made for that. So I think this is in discussion at the council level at the current time, so, and I think it's, something that will either come back here, the council will decide to come back here and have y'all look at it, or they wanna do it themselves, so.
We certainly need,
But
someone in the city needs a
it's in the
briefing
works
from the
to
engineers,
get-
right,
That's-
what you're working on, yeah.
And I think-
Okay, freeze,
Uh,
as to how what they actually do in the permit process in determining what kind of water can go into the streets and in natural drainage channels. And that's real, if we don't have the holding facilities on a property, then there's gonna be a lot more of that in the streets and in these natural drainage channels. If the issue is enforcement, a number of cities, and if you can look at water engineers' websites, the people who design these will also do annual inspections or semi-annual. And so the question is, do we want to require, along with the permitting process, that there be an inspection done every 2 years, every 5 years, and a report filed with the city? And is that a process? What's the cost of that to the homeowner? Is that a decent process? Those sorts of things. But I think it's at the council level at this point.
I think an engineer to that point, like, a septic tank, right, has a sensor that
know.
Yeah.
tells you when it's full,
Yeah,
is there
right.
something
Well-
along those lines with, if it's
Well-
filling
I
with
was
silt?
just thinking
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
septic.
Well, I think that sounds nice, but I don't hear really city council doing anything, and a council person approach, and,
It was on the very
Okay.
last item of a
Right.
very long meeting. At
Yeah.
the last council meeting, it was 11 o'clock.
Yeah,
issue.
right.
So it's gonna come back up.
Okay, okay.
Well,
All I can say is that when the CRCRC did its report on the drainage and impervious cover and FAR, and it went, a council person cornered me and said, this isn't good enough. Not enough here. And you guys should have done more with drainage. And we countered that we were not, we don't have the expertise or the budget to do anything more than what we're doing. And so I promised that, I wrote that last paragraph about actually creating the second group to look at this. And with the idea that that would at least address it, someone would start picking some of these things off the shelf again and taking a fresh look at them and seeing, well, what needs to be done? The idea maybe even drafting retired civil engineers that who may be here in Rollingwood that might be able to help us do this for no money. So now, all I can say is that I think something needs to be done. It needs to have some sort of P&Z component to it. And I'm ready to get started. I think I'm ready to get started on it if we can get someone to say that what it is we think we ought to do.
well, I would like to suggest that when the council begins to really discuss this more, that perhaps we have joint council and P&Z meetings. Because I think that to avoid duplication of
Yeah, particularly if
efforts,
we get engineers to come in to talk
Right.
about some of these
Yeah.
things, that you know.
I
we
would
shall
like to
hear.
be a part of the process, to be listening to it anyway.
That's all we've got on this. I mean, we're really nowhere on this, but I did want to bring it up for discussion. That what I thought that we had decided was we were going to take this on, whatever that meant. And if we need, if what we're deciding is that we need to get guidance from city council before we take any steps, that's fine, but I can probably make that happen. So. Any additional discussion? That's our final item. Do I have a motion?
On that item?
No, motion to adjourn.
Oh, I will move to adjourn.
Okay,
I'll second.
all right. It is, aye. It is 9:48, and I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.